Upon arriving at the Empire's most prestigious school with his parents, Lewis and his family are immediately stopped before they can even reach the gates. Two arrogant noble students bar their way, insulting them by claiming that commoners don't belong at the Arcanist Academy. To provoke a reaction, the bullies shove Lewis's mother to the ground. Although Lewis is on the verge of losing his temper and attacking them, his parents intervene. They urge him to stay focused on the upcoming entrance exam, rather than throwing away his future on a street fight. Frustrated but obedient, Lewis restrains himself, leaving the bullies disappointed that they didn't get a chance to beat him up for fun. However, Lewis quietly vows to himself that once he is officially a student, those nobles will face the consequences of their actions. Without lingering, he makes his way to the testing grounds where thousands of hopefuls, many much older than him, have already gathered. This age gap doesn't intimidate him in the least. Soon, the principal appears to kick off the proceedings. He explains that the initial challenge involves climbing a set of stairs guarded by senior students. Only 1,000 passes are available on a first-come, first-served basis, meaning the test ends the moment the last pass is claimed. As the exam begins, the crowd of applicants rushes forward, many underestimating the difficulty of the task. Their confidence is short-lived when a particularly cruel senior stands up and unleashes a terrifying dark red energy. This sudden burst of power overwhelms the applicants, knocking many to the floor as they are instantly disqualified. While the others are paralyzed by confusion and fear, Lewis remains calm. He realizes that the senior isn't physically attacking them, but rather using a powerful aura to crush their spirits. He explains to those around him that only those with a weak will are falling. The senior notices Lewis's composure and acknowledges his mental strength, yet he remains prejudiced, refusing to let a commoner succeed alongside the talented nobles. To stop him, the senior intensifies his aura, making it even more menacing. To Lewis, however, this supposed killing intent feels amateurish compared to the hardships and training he has already endured. With a smirk, he taps into his own martial arts prowess. He surges up the stairs, effortlessly cutting through the senior's pressure with his own ironclad resolve, fueled by a burning desire to show the nobility what true power looks like. Lewis lunges directly at the senior student, pulling back his fist as if to strike, while the crowd of onlookers watches in absolute terror. Even the senior is stunned that a commoner managed to break through his aura. However, Lewis halts his fist just inches from the senior's face, noting that the older student is now visibly sweating. A collective gasp ripples through the crowd. Everyone is shocked that a boy barely 13 or 14 years old possesses the raw strength to not only withstand a killing intent, but also launch a counterattack without using a single drop of magic. Ignoring the surrounding amazement, Lewis simply walks past the senior to collect his exam pass, grumbling about how exhausted he is by the whole ordeal. The senior, however, is furious at being disrespected. He swings a punch at Lewis in a fit of rage, but the boy blocks the strike effortlessly. This second display of skill leaves the senior deeply unsettled, unable to comprehend how a commoner could stop his attack without magical assistance. Before the situation escalates further, the principal steps in to de-escalate. He officially announces Lewis as the first person to pass the exam and reminds the gathered students that the academy treats everyone as equals, emphasizing their shared humanity over social status. Following this declaration, the senior bows in submission, and Lewis acknowledges the principal with a nod. When the principal approaches to congratulate him, he suddenly pauses, noting that the color of Lewis's hair is quite troubling. Though he refuses to explain further, his words trigger a sharp sense of alarm in Lewis. When the boy tries to press for more information, the principal cuts him off and leans in close, his expression turning serious. He warns Lewis that if he is admitted, the principal will personally create a potion to mask his unique physical traits. Confused and suspicious that this might be some kind of psychological test, Lewis decides to put the mystery aside for the moment, to focus on the challenges ahead. As Lewis walks away, the noble he humiliated earlier watches from a distance, fuming with resentment. He is particularly bitter that the principal broke tradition to intervene on behalf of a commoner and vows to get his revenge. Meanwhile, the successful candidates are moved to an indoor arena for the second phase of the exam. The numbers have dwindled from 20,000 to just 1,000, and nearly all the remaining applicants are nobles who have benefited from years of elite training. While Lewis is walking at the back of the group, another noble bully intentionally bumps into him. The noble sneers, warning Lewis that no one will be there to save him next time, and tosses out a classist insult. His follower joins in, claiming that Lewis only survived the first round because the principal interfered. This time, Lewis doesn't stay silent. He calmly retorts that the noble is a fool, pointing out that the principal's judgment is far superior to that of a low-ranking noble like him. Insulted by Lewis's response, the bully threatens to knock him unconscious, but Lewis only answers with a smirk. This reaction pushes the noble over the edge. He swings a punch at Lewis's face, but our hero dodges at the very last moment, using a precise martial arts maneuver known as Meridian Severance, a strike that disrupts internal energy flow. Lewis sends the noble flying through the air. As the bully's friends rush to help him, the entire room focuses on the scene. The defeated noble, struggling to get up, realizes with terror that his body is barely responding and his arm feels completely numb. He immediately accuses Lewis of using poison and threatens to involve the authorities. Lewis calmly dismisses the accusation, explaining that he used nothing but pure martial arts. While Lewis had promised his mother to stay out of trouble, he has his limits. He believes that anyone who strikes another must be prepared to be struck in return. Just as Lewis prepares to deliver another blow, a young man named Lord Kane intervenes by grabbing his arm. Kane warns him that continuing the fight will lead to disqualification, as the exam is still ongoing. Realizing Kane is right, Lewis pulls his arm away and gives him an annoyed glance before turning his back. Kane then turns his cold, intimidating gaze toward the loud-mouthed bullies, ordering them to be silent and retreat. Though they obey, their eyes are still full of spite. Lewis remains skeptical of Kane, assuming he is just another noble using his high status to boss others around. However, Kane surprises him by praising his strength and bravery, even offering to form a team together. Before Lewis can give an answer, a crowd of admirers, both girls and boys, swarms Kane, acting like devoted fans. Lewis doesn't have much time to process the interaction, as a whirlwind of light suddenly forms in the middle of the room. Principal Smith appears within the vortex to announce that the second phase of the test will measure their power. Almost instantly, a mysterious glow appears on the chests of all the applicants. While most are confused, Kane quickly identifies the phenomenon as an Earth attribute ability. A split second later, an overwhelming gravitational force hits everyone in the room. Their bodies feel incredibly heavy, as if they are pinned down by massive weights, and many of the students find it nearly impossible to remain standing. Even the formidable Kane has to grit his teeth, struggling against the gravity to remain upright. However, he is soon stunned by an unbelievable sight. Someone is moving forward as if the pressure doesn't exist. Forcing his gaze upward, Kane sees Lewis casually walking toward the stage, fully prepared for whatever comes next. This display of ease catches Principal Smith by surprise, though a look of genuine satisfaction crosses his face as he watches Lewis take the lead once again. While the other students find the intensifying weight almost unbearable for their bones, even after years of formal training, Lewis shows no signs of physical strain or even a slight tremor. This leaves Kane questioning the true extent of the boy's mysterious abilities. The principal eventually announces that only those who have managed to remain standing are eligible for the next phase. With a wave of his hand, he summons a variety of weapons and invites the candidates to take their pick. While most struggle just to balance themselves, Lewis calmly selects a solid sword. Smith then introduces the next challenge, which involves dealing with bound life forms. Before the confused applicants can ask for clarification, the principal vanishes, and a shout from the crowd draws everyone's attention upward. Glowing blue, jelly-like creatures begin rain down from the ceiling, bouncing across the arena floor. At first glance, these soft creatures appear far less threatening than the seniors from the previous round. The scoring system is explained. Hitting a creature grants 1 point, evading an attack earns 2, and successfully killing one is worth 5. With only the top 100 scorers moving on, several students mock the creatures as weak and rush in to secure easy points. However, their laughter quickly turns to terror. The moment they are touched, the slimes become incredibly aggressive, moving with deceptive speed and striking the applicants with massive force. The arena descends into total chaos as the swarming creatures launch a relentless assault. High above the battlefield, Principal Smith and his team of senior examiners monitor the progress. One examiner points out that the group includes several elite talents from powerful lineages, such as the Aranka and Durahan families. She also highlights a few suspicious participants, specifically mentioning the boy who took first place in the opening round. Hearing this, Principal Smith simply smiles, admitting that he finds that particular student very intriguing. The examiner notes with concern that Lewis has been standing still for some time, suggesting he might be falling behind. Many of the other candidates notice his inactivity as well, mistakenly assuming that he has finally reached his limit and given up. However, Louis is far from finished. He stands with his back slightly turned, perfectly aware of his surroundings even as a slime lunges toward him. At the very last moment, he dodges the creature's heavy strike with effortless grace, leaving onlookers baffled by his speed. As multiple slimes begin to spark with energy and charge at him simultaneously, it becomes clear that Louis is relying on intense preparation from his past. This level of skill is the result of a specific theory Louis developed in his previous life. He believed that by training his mind to bridge the gap between the parietal lobe and the cerebellum more efficiently, he could calculate attack paths and react to them instantly. To test this void combat calculation, he had previously convinced his reluctant friends to throw rocks at him. By predicting the trajectory of every projectile, he proved he could handle any incoming threat. Now he applies this same method to the exam. Since the slimes can only move in straight lines, their movements are easy for him to map out. He earns 8 points in a matter of seconds just by shifting his weight to avoid them. Deciding to go on the offensive, Louis draws his sword and executes a technique called Force Slash, cleanly bisecting the creatures to rack up even more points. His surgical precision shocks everyone, including the examiners, who look to Principal Smith for an explanation. Kane, watching the display, is thrilled to realize that Louis isn't just a lucky commoner, but a highly skilled martial artist. Seeing an opportunity, Kane decides that forming an alliance with Louis would be incredibly beneficial. As Louis prepares to take down another target, Kane suddenly intervenes, causing their weapons to clash over the same slime. Louis frowns, suspecting the noble is trying to steal his points, but Kane quickly clarifies that he is only taking points from their competitors, not from Louis himself. After properly introducing himself, Kane formally proposes that they work as a team to gather points together. Louis, however, remains hesitant, knowing that genuine trust is a rare commodity in such a competitive environment. Kane flashes a grin and proposes a challenge. They should turn the test into a competition to see who can rack up the most points. Intrigued, Louis agrees to the bet, adding a condition that the loser must follow any command the winner gives. Gripping his sword tightly, he declares his intention to reveal his true capabilities. As the two stand back-to-back in the arena, a group of envious nobles spots an opportunity to take out the commoner while still scoring points. One of them fires a volley of arrows directly at Louis. While the crowd gasps, expecting him to be struck, Louis remains perfectly still. To everyone's disbelief, he has caught all 3 arrows mid-air with his bare hands. Kane, furious that the others are resorting to such dirty tactics, checks if Louis is okay. The archer, feeling insulted when Kane calls his behavior disgraceful, responds by activating a magical technique known as Double Arrow Edge. He fires again, and while Kane manages to slice most of the projectiles out of the sky, one arrow slips past his guard and speeds toward him. Kane braces for the impact, expecting to be wounded, but the blow never lands. Opening his eyes, he finds Louis standing in front of him, firmly holding the blood-slicked arrow. Despite his hand oozing blood, Louis calmly tells Kane to relax, pointing out that the attack was actually intended for him from the start. Watching from above, an examiner notes the clear malice behind the assault and asks Principal Smith if the bullies should be disqualified immediately. Smith, however, advises patience, suggesting the bullies will soon cause their own downfall. He wants to keep observing the situation before dealing with the consequences later. Curiously, he also instructs the examiner to have healing potions ready, as he suspects Louis is about to start breaking some bones. Louis asks Kane if he is familiar with baseball, a sport that doesn't exist in this world, but decides to demonstrate the concept anyway. As a slime charges at him, he swings his sword like a bat, his blade flashing with thunderous energy as he smashes the creature toward the bullies. The slime slams into the lead bully, breaking his ribs and knocking him off the stage into instant disqualification. Without pausing, Louis lunges toward the remaining nobles, who are paralyzed by the sight of their leader's defeat. He flips over one of them and kicks a slime directly into the boy's face, the impact shattering his teeth and sending him flying out of bounds. Only one bully remains, sweating and panicking, unable to predict where Louis will strike next. Out of nowhere, Louis materializes behind the final bully and dares him to turn around. Even when cornered, the noble remains defiant, refusing to offer an apology. He continues to spout insults, arguing that his status makes him superior and that commoners must learn to stay in their place. Blinded by his own arrogance, the bully fails to notice someone stepping into his path. A moment later, he trips and tumbles off the stage, disqualified just like his companions. The person responsible for the trip is Kane, who then approaches Louis to thank him. Kane notices that Lewis has already bandaged the hand he injured while catching the arrow. As they share a high five, Lewis admits that, for a noble, Kane is actually a pretty decent guy. As they continue to run from the pursuing slimes, Kane makes it clear that he shouldn't be lumped in with the other nobles. He explains that he belongs to the Oranka family, one of the Empire's great clans. These families are legendary for producing numerous grandmasters and sages, giving them enough power and influence to rival the royal family or the arcanist associations. Lewis finds these new titles and names fascinating, making a mental note of them as they fight side by side. Meanwhile, the defeated bullies watch Lewis from the sidelines. Seeing a commoner perform so well fills them with a bitter, jealous rage. Unwilling to let him succeed, they launch another desperate attack toward the duo. This triggers a chain reaction, as Kane's loyal followers rush in to defend their lord, causing the situation to spiral out of control. What began as a test quickly turns into a chaotic free-for-all, with students turning on one another instead of the slimes. Nearby, a girl named Faye finds the developing carnage entertaining and calls her friend Miliana over to help her challenge the other nobles. While Lewis continues to use his martial arts to evade the slimes, he realizes that his high score is making him a target for more trouble. He notices Miliana cutting through opponents with ease, while Faye fights with impressive skill. Beside them, a red-haired boy named Neil Gunn seems to be losing himself in the violence. Swinging a massive hammer and punching people aside, Neil shouts that fighting his peers is far more enjoyable than chasing slimes, leaving a trail of exhausted opponents in his wake. High above the arena, the examiners watch the brawl with growing concern. One of them suggests that they should intervene before too many noble students are disqualified, but Principal Smith firmly disagrees. He tells his staff to stay back, claiming that watching such young talents clash with one another is far more entertaining than a standard exam. One of the staff members points out that disqualifying a large number of noble students might lead to complications, but Principal Smith remains unfazed. He dismisses the concern entirely, stating that he is indifferent to public opinion and is more interested in seeing how the situation unfolds. Suddenly, he steps into the arena and declares the second test over. He explains that official rankings will be posted shortly and lifts the heavy earth magic, allowing staff to hand out healing potions. Lewis gazes at the bottle in his hand with surprise, knowing that even a simple potion costs 3 silver coins, a price he could never afford. Seeing his distracted look, Kane asks if something is wrong and jokingly promises not to bully him even after he wins their bet. When the results are finally displayed, the nobles feel a sense of relief because Lewis's name is missing from the general list. However, their joy is short-lived when the principal reveals that the top 5 candidates actually shattered every existing record, so their names are being announced separately. Miljana Royce takes 5th place, followed by Kane Oranka in 4th and Faye Durahan in 3rd. To Kane's utter disbelief, Lewis secures 2nd place with 887 points. Kane is stunned not just by the score, but by the fact that a commoner could perform at such an elite level. Accepting the loss of their bet gracefully, Kane asks what Lewis wants from him, though the boy simply replies that he will reveal his request once the exam is fully finished. The top spot, with a record-breaking 888 points, is awarded to Neil, the red-haired fighter who had been causing chaos earlier. The crowd whispers in fear about Neil's immense power, especially since he is another commoner who managed to outperform the Durahan heir. While Miljana notices Faye shaking with suppressed rage, Faye quickly composes herself, stating that she looks forward to testing her skills against someone so powerful. At the same time, many seniors are fuming, embarrassed that the new generation of nobles was outperformed by low-born students. An examiner points out that having a commoner in 2nd place is something that hasn't happened since the academy was founded. He adds that, surprisingly, both of the top scorers come from an orphanage. Principal Smith clarifies that the Arcanist Association supports these orphanages because they believe true talent is found among the common people rather than being tied to social status. As the successful candidates head to the next testing site, Kane notes how close the score was and wonders who would actually win in a real fight between Lewis and Neil. Lewis, however, remains indifferent and shows no interest in answering the question. The final stage of the entrance exam takes the group to the Academy's training grounds, where Principal Smith explains that the last hurdle is a survival-based battle royale. Each student receives an emblem, and the objective is simple: collect as many as possible by any means necessary. Those who lose their own emblem are instantly out, and only the 10 people with the highest scores will be admitted to the school. Before the chaos begins, Kane tells Lewis that they should split up for the time being. He warns his friend that the top-ranked students from the previous round will likely be hunted, so he must stay sharp. Lewis, acknowledging that the ranking announcement was likely a deliberate attempt to put a target on their backs, vows to survive at any cost. Smith simply smirks at this, challenging everyone to prove their worth, as only the strongest will remain. As Lewis makes his way through the forest, he reflects on how close he is to his goal. His thoughts are interrupted when a noble blocks his path, claiming that Lewis insulted the entire nobility during the last test. Turning around, Lewis finds himself surrounded by two more bullies. While it might look like he is in trouble without anyone to defend him, the reality is that the bullies are the ones in danger. From above, an archer perched in a tree aims at him, leading Lewis to suspect that the academy staff might have leaked his position to stir up more conflict. The group launches a coordinated assault, but Lewis expertly evades their strikes. However, he is momentarily caught off guard by a powerful, unfamiliar energy attack that he is forced to parry with his sword. One of his opponents mocks him for his lack of magic as more enchanted arrows fly toward him. Yet his frustration grows as Lewis continues to dodge effortlessly. Though he is slightly on edge because magic doesn't follow the same predictable paths as physical objects, Lewis falls back on his advanced martial arts. He employs a technique known as sen no sen, which allows him to strike before his opponent can finish their move, turning their own momentum against them. When the leader orders everyone to attack at once, Lewis remains calm. He weaves through the crowd, skillfully redirecting their strikes so that the bullies end up hitting one another. When another magical arrow is fired, he shifts at the last moment, causing it to strike one of the other students instead. After tossing the injured bully aside, Lewis picks up a spear and hurls it toward the archer in the tree, taking out the sniper in one swift motion. After systematically taking down every opponent and seizing their emblems, Lewis allows himself a triumphant laugh. Despite the defeat, one noble desperately tries to rally his friends for another charge, but he is suddenly knocked to the ground by an arrow. High up in a tree, Kane sits casually watching the scene, having observed that Lewis does not utilize magic. The defeated bullies are stunned by Kane's presence, but he explains that he had already neutralized their allies and forced them to reveal their entire ambush strategy. When the bully continues to yell, Kane hits him over the head with his bow until he finally stops. Leaping down from his perch, Kane approaches as Lewis notes that he seems to be in the clear. Kane dismisses the threat, remarking that those low-level nobles had only recently learned basic magic and were no match for him. He hands Lewis the final emblem he collected, but warns that Lewis will face constant trouble if he keeps being targeted. Kane offers to help him navigate the rest of the exam, but Lewis turns him down, insisting on solving his own problems. The entire exchange is witnessed by Faye, who applauds Lewis for his strong sense of honor and integrity. However, she isn't there for small talk. She gets straight to the point by challenging Lewis to a duel. Kane quickly whispers to Lewis that Faye is the granddaughter of the Durahan family's grandmaster. Curious, Lewis asks if the two of them have ever fought. Kane hesitates, denying any close friendship but admitting they have faced off before, though he claims he only struggled because he let his guard down. Lewis immediately teases him about losing, which sends Kane into a defensive flurry of excuses. Faye soon interrupts their bickering, mockingly telling them to end their bromance and stop flirting. She repeats her challenge, while Kane warns Lewis that Faye is already at the apprentice stage in magic, an impressively high level for someone their age. He advises Lewis to simply ignore her and focus on the exam objectives. Irritated by their hesitation, Faye begins to mock them, accusing the boys of being cowards who plan to run away. She suggests that Kane is only trying to protect Lewis's ego because he knows a commoner can't win. This insult strikes a nerve. Despite Kane's annoyance, Lewis steps forward, his pride clearly wounded. He tells Faye that he has always been curious about how the great families fight and accepts her challenge. Faye smirks, pleased by his spirit, and offers to keep the fight fair by promising not to use magic. Without another word, she lunges forward with a secret technique called Lance Slam, aiming directly at him. Lewis remains motionless until the very last second. Just as it looks like a direct hit, he shifts his weight and traps the lance against his bicep. Impressed but undeterred, Faye spins her weapon in a full circle to force him to let go, then immediately follows up with a second heavy strike. Once more, Lewis manages to evade the strike by a hair's breadth. From their distant observation point, the examiners watch the duel with intense focus, noting that it has been quite a while since they witnessed the legendary spear techniques of the Durahan house. They praise Faye's remarkable speed and power, labeling her a genuine prodigy. At the same time, they are equally fascinated by Lewis's performance and begin placing bets on how much longer he can hold out, with one examiner predicting a quick defeat. When asked for his opinion, the principal admits his fondness for the boy, but argues that Lewis lacks the necessary experience to win. He explains that a true battle is a collision of physical strength and mental resolve, and currently, Faye holds the upper hand. Back on the battlefield, the air is thick with dust as Faye lunges relentlessly at her opponent. Lewis remains on the defensive, successfully dodging every blow until he spots a brief gap in her rhythm. He strikes back with enough force to nearly dislodge the spear from her hands. Frustrated, Faye watches as he leaps over her and lands gracefully behind her. She admits her disbelief that he has managed to avoid every single one of her moves, noting that even Cain from the Aranka family couldn't do that. For Lewis, however, the task is simple. As long as he observes her movements with enough care, the difficulty fades away. In response to his composure, Faye raises the stakes by unleashing a secret technique called the Lance Crescent Fall. Lewis quickly analyzes the situation, recognizing that a spear's combination of sweeps, defense, and long-range suppression makes it a difficult weapon to counter. However, he also identifies a critical flaw. The spear is vulnerable in close-quarters combat. He realizes that his best chance is to wait for the perfect moment to close the distance and strike. When he finally sees an opening and moves in, Faye dodges instantly and counters by spinning her weapon into a localized tornado. The observers are stunned, noting that even the Durahan Grandmaster didn't master this magical spear fusion until the age of 16. It seems as though the boys are defeated, but Lewis still has a strategy in mind. He employs a defensive sword net technique, banking on the fact that spear maneuvers consume a massive amount of stamina. He knows that if he can maintain a perfect defense, Faye will eventually tire and leave herself exposed. What he fails to notice, however, is that his own blade is beginning to crack under the pressure. Faye grows increasingly annoyed by his persistence until Lewis finally sees the opening he was waiting for. He launches a decisive counterattack, but at that exact moment, his sword shatters into pieces. While the spectators and Lewis are stunned by his bad luck, Faye acknowledges the feat, admitting that his strike would have succeeded if his weapon had held together. Although Faye likely suspects that Lewis is holding back, he apologizes and explains that he has a habit of observing his opponents before committing to a full-fledged attack. Now that he has gathered enough information, the atmosphere shifts as he becomes truly serious. Faye argues that they cannot keep fighting since his sword is in pieces, but Lewis is unfazed, noting that he is actually more skilled in hand-to-hand combat. As they both prepare for the next exchange, Faye lunges with a spinning charge. Despite Cain's warning that a direct hit would be devastating, Lewis enters a state of deep focus and manages to halt the spear with his bare hands at the final second. The observers watching from a distance are baffled. Faye's technique is designed to pierce through any defense, yet it seemingly failed against Lewis's skin. Even Principal Smith is left speechless by the display. Faye, refusing to quit, uses a quick kick to loosen Lewis's grip and reclaim her weapon. She immediately follows up with a significantly more powerful assault, striking from multiple angles at once. However, from Lewis's perspective, time seems to have slowed down. Using only his hands, he deflects every single blow with calm precision. Principal Smith is genuinely shocked as he realizes that Lewis is countering the renowned Durahan spinning spear style with a method he has never witnessed before. To have a commoner neutralize one of the world's most famous techniques is extraordinary. When Lewis finally pushes her back with a counterattack, an angry Faye demands to know how he is doing it. Lewis explains honestly that he simply applies a counter twist at the moment of impact to negate the spear's rotation, though the technical explanation completely confuses her. Deciding that actions speak louder than words, Lewis begins to move toward her with an unpredictable rhythm. He employs a style called the butterfly step, a graceful footwork technique inspired by a legendary boxer, which allows him to move with rapid, light-footed agility. To Cain, watching from the sidelines, Lewis looks like a fluttering insect or a flickering illusion. Although he appears to be right in front of Faye, he vanishes every time she tries to strike, shifting to a new position as if he were flying. Finally, Lewis spots the perfect opening and lands a punch so powerful it sends Faye soaring backward. Cain is stunned by the sight, and even Principal Smith finds it hard to believe that a young boy could inflict such heavy damage on a member of the Durahan family. The observers note that very few people possess the skill to defeat Faye in physical combat without using magic, leading them to suspect that Lewis might be a genuine prodigy of hand-to-hand fighting. However, Faye is far from ready to quit. Consumed by rage, she stands back up and asserts that her lineage is defined by an indomitable fighting spirit that won't allow such an easy defeat. To Lewis's surprise, she tosses her spear aside, deciding to meet him in a direct brawl. As she lunges forward, Lewis relies on martial arts like Wing Chun and Pak Sao to ward off her crushing fist technique. Despite his skill, Fei manages to land a blow that injures his hand, but rather than reacting with anger, Lewis simply smiles and ignores the pain. Fei continues her assault, reminding him of her family's strength as she upgrades her attack to the 3rd level of her crushing fist. This time, Lewis is prepared and switches to boxing maneuvers, leading to a fierce exchange of blows. A sense of exhilaration washes over him as a darker side of his personality begins to surface. He doesn't fight out of a desire for violence, but out of the pure joy of pushing his physical limits. His presence becomes increasingly menacing as he moves into Fei's personal space, releasing a dangerous aura that causes her to freeze momentarily. Although she tries to guard herself, Lewis delivers a strike so powerful it sends her crashing into a tree. While Principal Smith watches with deep concern, troubled by the nature of the technique Lewis is using, the other students are in a state of shock. Some of the bullies who had plotted against him earlier begin to shiver and feel physically ill, overwhelmed by the intensity of the boy's aura. They are filled with a mix of fury and fear, realizing they have vastly underestimated a commoner's potential. One student, struggling with a sense of nausea, decides that Lewis is a threat that must be eliminated immediately. If the legends about such power are true, they believe he cannot be allowed to survive. From their perspective, Lewis looks like a man possessed as he relentlessly pursues the exhausted and wounded Fei. She barely has time to brace herself before another punch sends her flying once more. It is clear that Lewis's speed and strength operate on an entirely different level, leaving her with no conventional way to win. Just as Lewis prepares a final strike and Fei fears for her life, she instinctively activates her magic martial arts to shield herself and launch a counteroffensive. The resulting explosion of energy throws both fighters backward. In an instant, the darkness fades, and Lewis returns to his usual calm demeanor. As he looks at his bloodied hands and contemplates the sheer force of magic, Kane rushes to his side to check if he is okay. Lewis confirms that he is okay, though he expresses doubt about Fei's condition. At that moment, the group of nobles who had been lurking in the shadows steps out to confront them. They point out that Lewis's emblem has been incinerated, which, according to the rules, means he is officially disqualified. Looking down, Lewis sees that the emblem is indeed nothing but ashes. Kane immediately attempts to intervene, arguing that the destruction was merely an accident. However, the bully dismisses his plea with a smirk, noting that since the principal witnessed the event, Kane won't be able to help a commoner cheat his way through. He demands that Lewis drop his gear and vanish, calling him trash that doesn't belong in the exam. Unexpectedly, Fei tells the bullies to be quiet. Everyone is stunned to see her standing despite her severe injuries. When the bully asks if she is really defending a commoner and warns her that she might face disqualification for breaking rules, Fei remains indifferent to his threats. She admits that she was the one who accidentally used magic and insists that Lewis earned his place, offering him a sincere apology. Kane is speechless at the sight of the high-ranking Fei apologizing to a commoner. Lewis, however, returns the gesture, explaining that he was the one who lost control of his temper and should be the one saying sorry. Though clearly frustrated by her defeat, Fei accepts his apology. She notes that he was the one who pressured her into using her powers, but she insists on a rematch once they have both officially enrolled. The bully interrupts with a laugh, mocking Lewis by pointing out that while he has 4 emblems, Lewis has 0 and won't even qualify. In response, Fei tears a piece of fabric from her clothing and hands it to Lewis. This cloth represents the 14 emblems she has already seized. With this single act, Lewis suddenly has a higher score than the bullies. Before departing, she mocks Kane and tells the bullies that the weak shouldn't succeed while the deserving fail. She refuses to allow such an injustice to stand. Picking up her spear, Fei declares her new objective. She must collect more than 14 new emblems to secure her spot. Kane, grinning, agrees that he has the same plan. The two of them dash back into the fray, eager to increase their counts and eventually settle their own bet. As Lewis watches his 2 new allies leave, a small smile appears on his face. He is so distracted that he fails to notice Principal Smith and an examiner descending from the sky. The principal informs him calmly that because his emblem was destroyed, he is disqualified and must be led out of the arena. Lewis accepts the decision without putting up a fight. Meanwhile, the bully fumes with rage, telling his friend that he never wants to see Lewis again. His friend, however, points out that if Faye and the others continue their streak, there might still be a way for Lewis to make it into the academy. Blinded by his own resentment, the bully is unable to think logically and begins to entertain a dark idea. He reasons that if an applicant were to die in a freak accident during the test, nobody would find it suspicious, particularly if the victim was just a commoner. His friend silently agrees, still shaken by the terrifying aura Lewis had displayed earlier. He is certain that something unnatural and dark resides within the boy. Meanwhile, Lewis turns in his emblems to the examiner, reflecting on the fact that while his martial arts are effective, they still struggle against the raw power of magic. He had hoped to attend the academy specifically to learn how to merge these two disciplines, but achieving that goal now feels nearly impossible. Later that evening, as he makes his way home, Lewis worries about his tattered and filthy clothes, imagining how much his mother will fret over his state. He is busy debating whether he should be honest with her or simply make up an excuse when he fails to notice a hooded figure approaching. Suddenly, the ninja strikes, stabbing him from behind. Lewis reacts with lightning speed, kicking the assailant away. When the assassin asks how he sensed the attack, Lewis explains that he can detect the scent of blood and murderous intent from a distance. A second attacker appears, mocking him for remaining so composed in the face of death. Lewis realizes these opponents are highly skilled and decides he must give his all, especially since a third, even more dangerous figure is observing the fight from a distance. The first ninja lunges forward with a dagger, but Lewis effortlessly evades every thrust. He quickly disarms the attacker, sending him crashing to the floor. Even when the ninja tries a desperate kick, Lewis blocks it, forcing the man to retreat and regroup with his allies. Impressed, the assassin remarks that Lewis's superhuman reflexes and fighting style match the information they were given. When Lewis questions the source of this intelligence, the ninja admits that while his hand-to-hand combat is impressive for an apprentice, it won't save him from magic. The attackers then move into a tactical formation, combining crossbows with wind-based spells. Lewis is nearly caught by the assault as magical arrows shred the trees behind him, recognizing them as the same type of wind projectiles the bullies used earlier. Realizing his life is truly at stake, he activates a special breathing technique. By tapping into the internal energy within his body, he enhances his physical limits and awakens his hidden potential. With this burst of speed and power, he charges at his foes, moving so quickly that the ninjas lose sight of him as he kicks and rolls through their magical barrage. Lewis is performing exceptionally well until a ninja abruptly intercepts his move, causing a sharp sting of pain to shoot through his hand. At that moment, he understands that the formidable aura he had sensed earlier belonged to a truly dangerous opponent. Finding himself encircled by assassins, he is forced into a desperate defensive position. Despite his best efforts, several magical arrows eventually find their mark, knocking him to the floor. The ninjas feel a sense of relief, as the effort of trying to hit such a fast target has left them exhausted. They are genuinely shocked that a commoner could be significantly more difficult to handle than a typical apprentice. Thinking the fight is over, one of the attackers moves closer, unaware that Lewis is merely faking unconsciousness. Suddenly, the boy springs to life and strikes the ninja in the throat with his fingers, throwing him backward. The lead ninja is surprised that someone so young could have the presence of mind to use such a classic trick, yet he remains impressed by Lewis's calm. Lewis then points a crossbow at the leader, questioning how he can remain so indifferent while his followers die before his eyes. The boss coldly dismisses them as worthless trash before effortlessly blocking the arrows Lewis fires at him. The leader then summons a massive magical hammer, admitting that he would have enjoyed taking Lewis on as a student if it weren't for the specific orders he received. He swings the heavy weapon, and though Lewis manages a last-second block, the force sends him tumbling through the air. The boss doesn't let up. He flies toward the mid-air boy and strikes him again, slamming him violently into the dirt. As he attacks, he acknowledges that Lewis's skills are superior to those of an apprentice, but reminds him that he is still just a novice who cannot hope to compete with a high-ranking warrior. As Lewis lies in the dust, the assassin rushes in to finish the job, but he suddenly hesitates, sensing that something is off. When the air clears, he is stunned to see Lewis already back in a fighting stance. Driven by an unbreakable will and the refusal to die, Lewis prepares for the next assault. The ninja, now more determined than ever, uses a martial arcane technique called the Celestial Hammer to hurl a massive, coffin-shaped rock at the boy. Facing certain death, Lewis's mind fills with thoughts of his family and the life he wants to lead. He thinks about his desire to master magic, protect his loved ones, and rewrite his own destiny. These powerful emotions trigger a transformation within him, causing that same dark, intense aura from before to resurface. Instead of trying to hide behind a defense, Lewis decides to meet the attack head-on, fueled by the conviction that he will survive. His powerful punch claps against the stone hammer with incredible force, causing a massive explosion that shocks the assassin. When the smoke finally dissipates, Lewis is seen on the ground, struggling for breath. The ninja remains undeterred, though he is unsettled by the feeling that he is now facing an opponent of equal strength. Witnessing Lewis's true potential, the assassin finally realizes why his mysterious client wanted the boy dead. He moves in to deliver a finishing strike with his hammer, but a sudden tornado of lightning intervenes. The blast forces him back, and before he can recover, the swirling storm engulfs him, leaving him battered and broken. From the ground, Lewis watches in a daze as Principal Smith descends from the sky. While Lewis remains on high alert, the principal seems genuinely pleased, relieved that the boy managed to regain control over his inner darkness. Smith offers him a potent magic potion, which Lewis drinks to restore his energy. Once the lightning storm finally dissipates, the assassin collapses. Principal Smith approaches the fallen man, demanding to know who would dare attack one of his students. Surprisingly, the ninja shows a flicker of respect for the principal, but warns him that even a grand master cannot contain a monster like Lewis. He cryptically adds that this assault is merely the start of the boy's dark destiny. Before they can learn more, the ninja abruptly explodes. The principal initially struggles to process what happened, but concludes it must be the work of an assassin guild, likely a suicide pact to protect the person who put a bounty on Lewis's head. Though he hopes he is just being paranoid, the situation remains grim. Meanwhile, Lewis stands up, amazed by the efficacy of the advanced potion. His body, including his broken bones, feels entirely mended. When he asks why the principal is always there to rescue him, Smith simply promises to explain everything once they reach his home. Suddenly, a wave of panic hits Lewis as he realizes he has missed his curfew. Terrified of his mother's reaction, he sprints toward his house with more speed than he used during his actual battles. Back at the scene, Principal Smith summons a magical snake named Skyly to dispose of the remains before following the boy. In the town of Mantia, located in the northern Candria Empire, a tense scene unfolds outside the orphanage. Two thugs are harassing Lachiella, accusing her of stealing tax money and threatening to swindle her. Despite her insistence that she is only looking out for the children, the gangsters mock her and prepare to attack. Just as one of them reaches out for her, a sudden kick sends him flying, knocking out his teeth. Lewis has arrived just in time to protect his mother. While Lachiella is overjoyed to see him, her relief quickly turns to horror when she sees his state. Before Lewis can even check if she is unharmed, she begins frantically questioning him about his shredded clothes, the bloodstains, and why his face is covered. Feeling embarrassed, Lewis tries to dismiss his mother's concerns by claiming his clothes got caught on a tree during the test, but she remains unconvinced. At the same time, the thug who had been knocked down struggles back to his feet. He angrily accuses Lewis of constantly breaking the rules and threatens to return with reinforcements. However, their bravado vanishes when Principal Smith steps in to help. After the principal introduces himself, the criminals are paralyzed with fear upon realizing they are standing before a genuine Grand Master. With a cold politeness, Smith asks them to deliver his regards to the local lord. Sensing the unspoken threat behind his words, both men flee the scene as fast as they can. Once the troublemakers are gone, the principal informs Lachiella that he needs to discuss a serious matter regarding her son. She invites them both inside, where Smith is immediately struck by the unusual technology in the house. He notices an automatic device that functions without any magical power, something the thugs had mentioned earlier. As he looks around, he discovers that these self-operating inventions are everywhere, from the floors to the ceiling. Lachiella admits she has no idea how Lewis built these things, but she expresses her gratitude because his inventions have made their daily lives much easier. She assumes that for a man of the principal's stature to visit personally, Lewis must have achieved something remarkable during his exam. Principal Smith finds her comment amusing, noting that Lewis didn't just do well, he exceeded every possible expectation. He explains that Lewis possesses a level of talent he has only ever seen mentioned once in the ancient Gaia scriptures. According to the legends, during a time when monsters ruled humanity with cruelty, a single genius appeared with the goddess's guidance. This individual mastered the elements and invented martial arcane techniques, eventually leading his allies to victory over the monsters 5 years later. This triumph saved humanity from extinction and became the starting point of their current calendar, known as Liberation Day. While Lachiella is fascinated by the tale of the first hero, Lewis is confused as to why common folk stories never mention such a person. The principal clarifies that this figure appears differently across various texts, but is consistently described as a man with black hair and black eyes. At this detail, Lachiella becomes quiet and protective, while Lewis is visibly startled by her change in mood. Smith reveals that the hero's story is a closely guarded secret among the elite because, despite saving the world, the hero eventually succumbed to a dark madness. He committed the ultimate sin by murdering his own friends and was subsequently erased from history to serve as a warning. Looking at his hands, Lewis reflects on the times he felt his own self-control slipping. The principal stands up, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. He explains that in every nation, anyone born with black hair and eyes is executed immediately to prevent history from repeating itself. He then looks directly at Lewis and asks if he truly believed a simple bottle of hair dye could keep his identity a secret forever. Stepping forward to defend her son, Lachiella confesses that she was the one who insisted he dye his hair. She explains that she wasn't trying to hide a monster, but was simply a terrified mother trying to protect her child, and she personally vouches for Lewis's kind nature. Lewis tries to soothe his mother, pointing out that if the principal had any intention of executing him, he would have done so by now. He is convinced that the man's visit serves a specific purpose. Principal Smith smiles in response, clearly impressed that a 13-year-old has managed to control and even subdue the madness within, a feat that leads him to see Lewis as a potential new hero. While Lewis is taken aback by this title, the principal clarifies that the current global peace is merely a facade. He explains that a deep darkness is always present, and after observing Lewis during the entrance exam, he dismissed the idea that legends were mere fiction. Consequently, he has decided to mentor Lewis for the benefit of all humanity. To test him, Smith tosses an apple, which Lewis catches with natural ease. The principal then delivers the good news. Because Faye and Kane were so efficient in the final test, the majority of the other candidates failed, meaning Lewis has officially passed. Welcoming him to the academy, the principal offers to personally oversee his training. Stunned by this sudden trust, Lewis begins to ask if he is destined to lose his mind like the hero of the legends. Before he can even complete the sentence, Smith snatches the apple back and warns him sternly that if he ever falls into insanity, he will be the one to end his life. The following day, Lewis spends his time repairing a fence alongside his foster brother. His brother is buzzing with excitement, unable to grasp the fact that Lewis received a personal invitation from a grandmaster. While his brother views this as a massive honor, Lewis remains cautious. He knows the invitation was also a veiled warning, though he keeps this to himself to keep his family calm. As his brother talks endlessly about the logistics of the academy, such as uniforms and dorm fees, Lewis is lost in thought. He wonders how a simple noble boy like himself could be linked to the first hero. He can't stop replaying the previous night's events, how easily the principal saw through his hair dye and the seriousness of his threats. Lewis finds himself questioning how much he can truly rely on the man's promises. He also recalls a conversation from the night before. While they were walking together, Lewis had questioned why the principal allowed his mother to hear such terrifying truths. Smith had replied quite seriously that she needed to know the reality of the situation, or she would simply become an obstacle on his journey. Although Lewis is offended by the suggestion that his mother is a burden, the principal warns that once Lewis's true nature is exposed, his entire family will be in peril. He argues that as a mother, she must be strong enough to accept the trials that are only just beginning. After giving this advice, the principal took flight and left. Reflecting on this now, Lewis realizes the man was right. He must increase his own strength to protect everyone he loves. Suddenly, a group of children from the orphanage runs toward him, full of joy. A young girl named Lana hugs him while crying, asking if he will ever come back to see them. Lewis comforts her, promising that he will visit often and even bring some of them back with him during school holidays, reminding her that this place is his true home. They seal the promise with a pinky swear. Shortly after, their moment is interrupted by the arrival of a noble butler. He explains that he represents the Aranka family and that young Master Kane has sent a formal invitation for Lewis to visit their estate. Handing over the authentic-looking letter, the butler makes it clear that Kane is eager to strengthen their bond before the academic year officially begins. Accepting the invitation with excitement, Lewis climbs into the carriage and begins his journey. Upon arriving in the town of Harzan within the Kandria Empire, he steps out of the vehicle as the butler offers a respectful bow. The fame and wealth of the Aranka family are evident throughout the town, but the sheer scale of the estate still catches Lewis off guard. He stands with his mouth open in disbelief, finally realizing the true extent of Kane's noble background. Before he can head inside, Kane runs toward him with great energy, nearly hugging Lewis while expressing his joy that they will be classmates. Lewis jokingly congratulates him on the chaos he caused during the final exam and admits that he only passed thanks to the help of Kane and Faye. He suggests they call off their bet since they are now even, but Kane insists on keeping it going, noting that Lewis had the skill to pass regardless. Kane also mentions that having Faye's approval is a rare and impressive feat. As they enter the mansion, the staff members bow in greeting. Kane proposes a sparring session before the school year begins, arguing that they didn't get a proper chance to fight during the entrance exam. He also offers to help Lewis with any questions he has about the academy or subjects like mathematics. Their conversation is suddenly cut short by Kane's mother, who stands on the staircase looking visibly displeased. When Kane tries to introduce Lewis as his friend, she silences him with a single terrifying look that leaves him speechless. Marching down the stairs, she begins to insult Lewis directly, claiming she always told her son to be selective with his company. She declares that the Aranka family gates are not open to just anyone, and that a commoner like Lewis is an insult to their lineage. She suggests that Kane should focus on training with strong peers, rather than wasting time with the poor. While a humiliated Kane watches, she approaches Lewis and demands to know his true intentions, asking if he is after money or influence. To show her disdain, she takes off a ring worth a fortune in gold and tosses it at his feet, telling him to take the payment and never return. Kane desperately asks his mother to stop the insults and begins to apologize to his friend, but he is stunned to see Lewis actually kneeling to pick up the jewelry. However, Lewis's response is not what she expected. He calmly states that he befriended Kane because he respected his talent, adding that if she believes her son's worth is only equal to a single ring, then she is the one who should be ashamed for belittling her own child. Kane is amazed at how Lewis managed to flip his mother's logic against her, while the woman becomes so enraged that she begins screaming for the servants to drag Lewis out of the palace immediately. The staff members move to seize Lewis, but Kane tries to intervene, asserting that his friend is actually more gifted than he is. He attempts to convince his mother by pointing out that Lewis shattered previous exam records and even defeated Faye. Unimpressed, his mother dismisses these claims as impossible, refusing to believe that a commoner could ever outshine the children of elite families. She mocks Kane for thinking she would fall for such an obvious lie. Kane stands his ground, and Lewis contributes to the tension by stating that his presence will actually help Kane become even more powerful. This arrogance shocks Kane's mother, who is offended that a commoner would dare to speak so boldly in her presence. As her angry voice fills the hall, the doors suddenly swing open to reveal a mysterious newcomer. The man repeats Lewis's claim, asking if it is true that he can make Kane stronger. The room falls silent as Kane's mother realizes with horror that her husband, William, the head of the Aranka family, has returned. Stuttering, she tries to lead him away, insisting that Lewis is beneath their notice. However, William ignores her and approaches his son, who offers a respectful bow. Lewis also greets him politely, sensing that William possesses a massive aura comparable to Principal Smith's. Disregarding the pleasantries, William asks his son directly if Lewis truly possesses superior skills, and Kane confirms that his friend's abilities surpass his own. To settle the matter, William challenges Lewis to prove his worth. He releases a terrifying aura filled with such intense killing intent that Lewis feels as if he is being hunted by a lion. The pressure is so heavy that he struggles to breathe, feeling his very soul being attacked. Just as it seems he might break, Lewis manages a miraculous feat of resistance. Drawing on his own willpower and the mental toughness he built through years of hunting monsters, he counters William's presence with his own aura. This hidden potential shocks the onlookers. Lewis realizes that if this is only the start of his journey, there is much more to learn. Gathering his strength, he releases his aura with such explosive force that William is momentarily stunned. To the Grand Master, it looks as though a fearsome dragon has appeared to challenge his lion. The two auras clash in a silent battle of wills as Kane watches in disbelief at his friend's incredible display of power. Although Lewis manages to withstand the pressure, the effort leaves him completely drained. He eventually bows before William out of sheer exhaustion, laughing off the situation when Kane rushes to his side to check on him. William finally begins to view the boy with genuine respect following that display of power. When asked about his motivation for seeking strength, Lewis explains truthfully that his primary goal is to keep his family safe. Without further comment, William turns to depart, but not before telling his son that his resolve is lacking and that he ought to learn from Lewis. His wife, stunned by this remark, chases after him to beg him to reconsider, but William ignores her entirely. Although Kane feels a fleeting sense of pity watching his mother cower in fear of his father, he quickly moves past it and suggests to Lewis that they head to the training grounds to begin their session. Once they arrive at the practice field, Kane expresses his regret regarding his mother's insults and his parents' general conduct. Lewis brushes the apology aside, though he does comment that William's methods seem a bit intense. He tries to reassure his friend that there isn't much of a gap between them, but Kane sadly explains that such is the life of a high-ranking noble's son. He describes his father as a man who values only merit. To earn his respect, one must achieve immense power. Kane even jokes that, at this rate, Lewis seems more like a true member of the Aranka family than he does. Even when Lewis suggests that the recent test was a father's unique way of showing affection, Kane remains unconvinced. Staring up at the sky, Kane reflects on how distant the concept of love has always felt in his household. He realizes that his entire childhood was spent within the walls of the estate, a repetitive cycle of eating, sleeping, and relentless practice. His training began at a very young age, forcing him to battle creatures that were physically larger than he was. Because his father expected him to become a great sage like his grandfather, Kane spent his days swinging a sword simply to earn a moment of recognition. To him, the mansion has always felt more like a prison than a home. He recalls watching other children play joyfully with paper planes, while he was stuck fighting battles he barely understood. It often felt as though he needed permission just to breathe. Despite the constant praise from adults calling him young master, those titles felt like heavy chains around his neck. The more restricted he felt, the stronger his desire to escape and fly freely like a bird grew, yet he fears that dream is impossible in his current reality. Feeling too weak to confront or challenge his father, Kane believes his only option is to meet those high expectations. He continues to swing his sword, hoping that by becoming stronger, he will one day find the power to break his own chains. Moreover, Kane's father is a graduate of the very same academy they are about to join. Kane explains that his goal is to enroll, gain enough power to surpass his current limits, and finally secure the independence to live however he chooses. To seal this declaration, he draws his blade and points it at Lewis, telling him that he is relying on his help to become the best version of himself. Lewis accepts the challenge without hesitation. Meanwhile, William observes their duel from a distance and asks his butler for an update on the investigation into Lewis. The butler reports that Lewis is certainly not a normal child. During the entrance exam, he employed mysterious fighting styles that were completely unknown to the observers. He emphasizes that Lewis didn't just break records, he actually defeated Faye while she was using magic and he was not. The report also mentions that the principal holds the boy in high esteem, having even fought off an assassin guild to protect him the previous night. William concludes that Lewis is quite a troublemaker, but when his butler asks why he would allow his son to befriend someone so dangerous, William reveals his true strategy. He believes that since trouble leads to growth, Kane will only become stronger by facing the challenges that naturally follow Lewis. As William shares these thoughts, Lewis continues to dominate Kane in their practice match. Eventually, Kane draws his sword and urges Lewis to stop holding back. Watching them, William quietly admits that his son has a much better eye for judging character than he had initially given him credit for. Kane strikes with a magical wind lunge, but Lewis reacts with surgical precision. He not only blocks the attack, but launches a counterpunch so swiftly that Kane doesn't even see it coming. It is only when Lewis's finger lightly taps his skin that Kane realizes he has been bested. Lewis points out that while accelerating magic with more magic is a clever move, Kane's movements are currently too straight and predictable. Stunned that Lewis countered him so easily despite his magical advantage, Kane begins to understand how he managed to defeat Faye. However, Lewis suddenly drifts into a serious mood. When a confused Kane asks what he is thinking about, Lewis asks if Kane has ever noticed anything unusual or off about his own combat style. Kane admits that he hasn't noticed anything unusual, explaining that his methods are classified techniques handed down through the Aranka lineage. Even though his father and grandfather became powerful by mastering these exact skills, Lewis argues that those results aren't what he is talking about. He suggests that Kane might find a unique path for himself, one that deviates from the traditions of his ancestors, leaving Kane stunned by his friend's perspective. Lowering his sword, Lewis picks up a pair of daggers from the nearby weapon rack and turns back to Kane, asking if he feels like giving his father a real surprise. This leads to the current moment, where William watches as both boys suddenly leap into the air and launch a coordinated, unannounced strike directly at him. Just moments before, Lewis had been providing Kane with a brief martial arts tutorial, emphasizing that speed is the ultimate weapon in combat. He clarified that true speed involves not just physical movement, but also reaction time and the ability to make split-second decisions. Reflecting on Kane's performance during the second exam, Lewis noted that while Kane's natural quickness works perfectly with his brain attribute support magic, thrusting techniques are notoriously hard to perfect. He pointed out that just because his grandfather was a master of the sword didn't mean Kane was obligated to follow that same road. Handing the daggers to Kane, Lewis explained that Kane's father likely hit a plateau in his growth because he restricted his own potential by simply copying a pre-existing style. To avoid making that same mistake and to unlock his true talent, Lewis argued that Kane needed to overhaul his fighting style completely. Kane embraced the idea, noting that Lewis was unlike any other noble he had met. He declared his willingness to try anything, even learning entirely new techniques, to gain his freedom. After sharing a laugh and a few cigarettes while finalizing their plan to showcase Kane's new determination by attacking his father, the two friends had launched their assault. Using his wind magic to gain momentum, Kane rushes toward William alongside Lewis. The butler is baffled by William's lack of a defensive reaction, but the Grand Master simply tells him to remain silent. As Kane closes in, William calmly parries and evades the strike, repeating the same effortless defense against Lewis. Lewis continues to press the attack relentlessly, believing that daggers offer the best advantage in terms of speed and maneuverability. By combining these weapons with his butterfly step technique, he hopes to overwhelm his opponent's reaction time and deliver a high-speed barrage. Although William is slightly taken aback to see Lewis utilizing the butterfly step, he remains composed, successfully dodging every single blow directed at him. At the same time, Kane utilizes his wind magic to vault into the air, launching an assault on William from a different angle. Using daggers makes his body feel remarkably light, giving him the sensation of a bird in flight. He is not only fond of his new equipment, but also thrilled by how perfectly the daggers, his fighting style, and his wind magic merge to grant him newfound power. During the clash, he declares that he has finally discovered a martial arts path that truly belongs to him. William, however, decides that the game has gone on long enough and releases a burst of his aura, knocking both boys backward. He is furious that Kane would discard the traditional Oranka family techniques just to assert his independence, labeling his son's actions as naive. Despite the setback, Kane and Lewis quickly steady themselves and prepare a fresh assault, combining Lewis's rapid agility with Kane's wind-assisted speed. With a simple hand gesture, William stops a dagger mid-strike and shoves Kane back, calling him a coward as he pursues him. At that moment, Kane recalls Lewis's advice. Retreating isn't a sign of weakness, but a tactical choice that is sometimes necessary in combat. Following this strategy, Kane backs away momentarily to find his footing before charging his father again. Just as William reaches for him, Kane uses his wind magic to flip over his father's head like a localized tornado, striking from the rear while Lewis moves in simultaneously for a coordinated blow. Earlier, Lewis had shared a peculiar but effective concept from a sport called baseball, known as a change-up. He explained that a fighter could confuse an opponent by constantly shifting their speed and rhythm, making even basic moves dangerous if the opponent's timing is thrown off. By pairing this deceptive timing with the natural speed of a dagger, a fighter can overwhelm their target. The boys apply this exact method now, but William remains composed. He blocks Kane's strike, assuming it is a meaningless low-level move, only to be stunned when Kane's weapon ends up just centimeters away from him due to a last-second deception. While Lewis feels a sense of pride in his friend's progress, William abruptly brings the session to an end. Turning away from a sweating Kane, the Grandmaster warns him not to bring shame to the Oranka name as he walks off. Kane takes this as a victory, interpreting his father's words as a silent acceptance of his choice to use daggers. As they leave, the butler follows William, who quietly reflects on the boy's interesting use of close-range strikes and hit-and-run tactics. He finds it surprising that he, a Grandmaster, could learn something from children, and feels a secret sense of pride in his son's growth. Lewis, meanwhile, is grateful for the chance to test himself against someone of William's caliber. Though he is slightly disappointed the fight ended so soon, Kane is overwhelmed with joy, having finally earned his father's recognition for the first time in his life. Thrilled by this success, he decides to show his gratitude by taking Lewis to the Oranka family's massive library. Lewis is stunned by the sheer volume of books, but before he can explore, Kane presents him with a box as a token of appreciation. He credits Lewis for helping him discover his true potential so rapidly and insists that he accept the gift. Inside, Lewis finds gold, several precious items, and rare magical texts that are usually off-limits to commoners. Studying these advanced books, which cover everything from basic theory to martial arts across the Academy's multi-year curriculum, will be a massive advantage for him. As they look through the materials, Kane mentions that every incoming student must participate in a magic awakening ritual. When Lewis asks for clarification, Kane explains that this ceremony involves using a sacred statue of Gaia to sense the elements. While Kane performed his ritual at a temple, he notes that even noble families have to pay 10 gold coins for the privilege. Lewis is horrified by the cost, realizing that such an amount could sustain his entire orphanage for years. He worriedly asks if the Academy charges the same fee, but Kane reassures him that the school provides the ritual for free, which is why admission is so highly competitive. Still, because expenses like rent and supplies are still quite high, Kane urges Lewis to keep the gift and promises to support him whenever he faces financial trouble. To prevent any further argument, Kane pushes the box into his hands, suggesting they consider it a fair trade for their earlier bet. Grateful for the gesture, Lewis eventually accepts the help, but begins to brainstorm ways to generate his own income. He recalls hearing that pharmacists who specialize in magic can earn a fortune and begins searching the library for related texts. An idea soon strikes him. He could potentially make a lot of money by reinventing items using knowledge from his past life. He asks Kane if the Oranka family has any ties to the Merchant Guild. When a curious Kane asks why he wants to know, Lewis simply teases that it is a secret for the moment, though his friend will likely discover the truth before long. A week has passed, and the freshmen at the Academy are walking with nervous excitement as the entrance ceremony begins. Among them is Lewis, who is genuinely thrilled that this day has finally come. His presence quickly catches the attention of an attractive senior girl, who is intrigued by his expensive scent. Noticing he is wearing a very trendy and costly cologne, she immediately assumes he must belong to a wealthy family, perhaps even that of a count. Eager to make a useful connection, she introduces herself as Rose from the 150th class and offers to be his guide. Lewis accepts her help and introduces himself, though Rose is puzzled by his surname, Grill. Despite never having heard of it, she finds the name somewhat intimidating and begins to wonder if he might be the illegitimate son of a high-ranking noble. As they stroll through the grounds, Lewis observes the hidden tensions of the school. He notes that while the campus appears calm, a fierce competition for resources exists behind the scenes, fueled by long-standing rivalries between imperial heirs and the great noble families. While diligent students can advance by earning credits, those who are targeted by rivals or fail their courses face immediate expulsion. Rose warns him that many eyes are already on him, and that he must perform well to survive. When she asks about his family's financial backing, her physical closeness makes Lewis feel a bit flustered and uncertain of how to respond. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted by a student named Brian, who pulls Rose away and identifies Lewis as the record-breaking commoner from the entrance exam. Rose is visibly disappointed, realizing she has wasted her energy on a commoner regardless of his sophisticated scent. Lewis, unbothered by her change in attitude, turns to Brian, who advises him to ignore people like her. Brian explains that the Academy acts as a small-scale version of the Empire, containing every type of personality imaginable. When Kane approaches them, Brian quickly excuses himself, offering his help to Lewis should he ever need it. Lewis is curious about why Brian left so abruptly, but Kane clarifies that they aren't close, mentioning that Brian is the son of the Academy's chancellor. Faye soon joins them, describing Brian as a decent person who lacks a strong will. Her arrival immediately sparks a playful argument with Kane, forcing Faye's kind friend, Miliana, to step in and try to lead her away so they can complete their registration. Before they leave, Lewis expresses his gratitude to Faye for her support during the exam. She dismisses the thanks, insisting that his success was entirely his own doing, and continues to tease Kane as Miliana pulls her along. Once they are alone, Kane reveals a large stash of gold, explaining that it represents Lewis's portion of their recent profits. Lewis is stunned by the amount, but Kane credits their success to following Lewis's plan at the Burna Village Trading Company. This wealth came from selling a unique perfume Lewis had invented, which featured a delicate scent far superior to the traditional fragrances available on the market. Although Kane enjoys the scent of the perfume, he remains skeptical about its commercial potential. Lewis, however, is certain of its success, And his intuition proves correct, as they quickly generate profits that exceed Kane's wildest expectations. While Kane plans to share his portion of the earnings with his mother, he finds himself fascinated by Lewis's mind, eager to understand what drives his friend's brilliance. As they head toward the reception area, Lewis asks Kane to keep their business venture a secret, a request Kane readily accepts. Upon reaching the desk, a teacher hands Lewis his student credit card, advising him to keep it safe and offering him a warm welcome to the school. During the registration process, Lewis becomes the subject of harsh whispers from other students. They mock him as shameless and express their disgust that the academy would allow commoners to attend alongside nobility. Gossip spreads about how he defeated Faye and Shane, and how his presence led to the expulsion of several students. It is during this time that Lewis discovers Sheath has been kicked out. Kane clarifies the situation, explaining that once the school found out Sheath had hired the Assassin's Guild, they took immediate action. Lewis finally realizes that Sheath had been his stalker all along. Kane warns him that Sheath has an unpredictable older brother named Jess, advising Lewis to stay alert. When Lewis catches Jess's eye, he feels no fear, but Jess is clearly thrilled, mentally preparing to make Lewis's academic life a total nightmare. Later, the freshmen gather in the grand hall for the welcoming ceremony. Principal Smith addresses the crowd, telling them they should take pride in reaching this stage, though he warns that their journey is only just beginning. He encourages them to work hard to become the pillars of the empire. The atmosphere shifts when the principal introduces the top student of the year, Neil Gunn, to give the representative speech. Neil's arrival shocks the room. Not only is his bloodlust overwhelming, but he is also completely undressed. Although the horrified examiners try to stop him, the principal allows him to continue. Neil immediately insults his classmates, calling them fools and declaring that his only goal is to crush every one of them. While the students are initially furious at his arrogance, they are quickly silenced by the terrifying pressure he exerts. The teachers are left despairing over how to handle such a volatile student, with some even contemplating resignation. Suddenly, Neil hurls his massive hammer across the room, where it lands right in front of Lewis. Jumping onto the weapon like a madman, Neil announces to the stunned audience that Lewis is his only true rival and that a legendary fight is about to take place. Reacting with protective panic, Kane quickly positions himself between Neil and Lewis to shield his friend. He warns Neil that the entrance ceremony is still in progress, demanding that he act properly and keep his distance. Neil responds with mockery, taunting Kane for his fear and insulting all nobles as pale and weak. Just as Kane's rage boils over and he prepares to strike, Lewis steps in to restrain him, urging his friend to keep his cool. Neil, however, continues to provoke them, labeling them both cowards and declaring his readiness to take them both on at once. Attempting to act as a mediator, Brian arrives and highlights Neil's talent as a fellow commoner. He advises Kane and Lewis to reconcile for their own benefit, arguing that selfishness will only hinder their survival at the academy. Neil remains unimpressed, rudely telling Brian to get lost and dismissing him as a nobody. While Brian is visibly embarrassed and Kane is secretly amused by the awkwardness, Lewis is left puzzled as to why Brian would tolerate such disrespect to defend someone like Neil. Nearby, the student body gossips in shock at the commoner's rudeness. Sensing an opening, Kane grins, which prompts Neil to threaten Brian with violence. Fortunately, a teacher intervenes, reminding everyone that unsanctioned fighting is strictly forbidden outside of official classes or tournaments and results in instant expulsion. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Neil becomes slightly flustered and backs down, deciding to postpone the confrontation, though the tension between him and Lewis remains unresolved. With the ceremony concluded, the teacher announces that the students are free for the day before classes begin tomorrow. Lewis is still trying to understand why Neil targeted him so aggressively, leading Kane to jokingly shift the blame onto Faye. Faye responds by hitting Kane, admitting that Neil's grudge might be her fault since they fought to a draw during the final exam. She notes that rumors of Neil losing to Lewis have only intensified the boy's desire for vengeance. Although Faye is relieved the situation didn't escalate further, Lewis assures her that he is fine. Their friendly moment is cut short when Kane drags Lewis away, pointing out that the other students are already staring at them with clear hostility. Later that day, the two friends visit the academy shop, where Lewis is stunned to see the exorbitant prices of basic goods. When a shopkeeper suggests that a fluffy feather pillow is a bargain at 30 silver coins, Lewis can't believe his ears. He slaps his forehead in frustration as she presents even more expensive options. Kane tries to comfort him, explaining that these prices are actually on the lower end for the academy, and encouraging Lewis to treat himself to some daily necessities, since he deserves to splurge occasionally. Lewis quickly understands the significant weight that money and academic credits carry at the school. Using a portion of his savings, he manages to purchase a basic starter kit for 100 silver coins. He feels a wave of relief, knowing that without the profits from his perfume business, he would have been in a desperate financial situation. After setting aside what he needs, he decides to send the remaining funds back to the orphanage. While observing the expensive cleaning potions on display, he begins brainstorming new ways to increase his income. As he leaves the shop, he spots Faye and Miliana discussing the magic awakening ceremony scheduled for the next day as they head toward the dormitory. Watching them carry numerous shopping bags, Lewis realizes they have spent a considerable amount on his products. This thought makes him reflect on his family's tireless work back at the dorms. Eventually, he begins searching for room 60, silently praying that his roommate won't be a troublemaker. His search is interrupted when a futon is suddenly thrown in his path, blocking the hallway. Peering into the room, Lewis discovers a group of students intimidating a freshman, claiming that he must obey their orders for his own sake. Despite being cornered, the boy appears completely indifferent, even when one of the aggressors grabs him. Lewis intervenes by tapping the bully's arm, sending a painful jolt through his limb. He sternly reminds the group that fighting is a reason for expulsion and asks if they are prepared to face that consequence. The bullies immediately act defensive, accusing Lewis of being the aggressor. When one student tries to attack, Lewis skillfully redirects the movement, causing the boy to accidentally strike his own friend and knock him down. Lewis smirks, pointing out that he hasn't actually laid a hand on anyone. The scene descends into confusion as Lewis uses precise kicks to make the bully's legs jerk involuntarily, causing them to trip and collide with each other in pain. Frustrated and bewildered, the leader accuses Lewis of using some kind of monster-like body control, a label that clearly irritates Lewis. Before the tension escalates further, the boy who was being bullied steps in and asks Lewis to let the matter go. After delivering a final threat to ensure they won't return, Lewis allows the group to leave, and they flee while muttering empty warnings. As Lewis helps the freshman gather his things, he notices the name Kara Candace on the bedding. He attempts to start a friendly conversation, but the boy, who is painfully shy and a prime target for bullies, quickly vanishes. Reflecting on the chaos of his very first day, Lewis can only hope that tomorrow's ritual proceeds without any more trouble. In the shadows of the Great Hall, a few individuals secretly meddle with the surroundings, intent on placing obstacles in Lewis's way. The following morning, the freshmen and the rest of the student body assemble in the hall for the anticipated ceremony. Lewis arrives alongside his roommate, Kara, who remains as silent as ever, refusing to utter a single word to him. Standing prominently in the center of the room is an enormous monument dedicated to Gaia, the goddess of their world. A priest stationed at the base of the monument commands the crowd's attention, formally introducing the deity and recounting the ancient history of their land. He explains that while Gaia originally intended for humans and monsters to live together in harmony, the monsters eventually used their superior strength to oppress humanity. During that dark era, dragons dominated the air, behemoths controlled the land, and krakens ruled the oceans. The world became a landscape of violence and bloodshed as these creatures fought for supremacy, nearly wiping out the human race. Distressed by the chaos, Gaia decided to intervene by bestowing a divine blessing upon the magic-less humans. This gift allowed humanity to grasp the true essence of the four natural elements, water, earth, wind, and fire, which led to the birth of martial arts. Following centuries of brutal conflict, humans finally managed to overcome their oppressors and claim their place as the world's leaders. The priest reminds the students that they are the heirs to this legacy, possessing the potential to awaken the magical power of the world. Lewis pays close attention to the sermon, yet he realizes that the first hero mentioned previously by the principal is still missing from the official narrative. Nearby, Kara watches Lewis intensely, though he maintains his characteristic silence. The priest eventually approaches the two boys and directs them towards specific seats. Although confused, they follow his instructions. The priest warns that those with genuine talent will perceive the elements, but those who sense nothing are unfit for the academy. As he speaks, Lewis notices a subtle sense of hostility or tension directed at him by the man. After dismissing the initial crowd, the priest announces the start of the ceremony and tells everyone to sit. Lewis remains unsettled by the strange look he received, wondering if he had somehow bothered the priest. To begin the ritual, The priest names the 4 elements again and tells the students to focus their minds on sensing the power within them, promising that Gaia will guide their discovery. As he activates his magic, glowing symbols representing the elements appear in the corners of the hall. Brilliantly bright energy radiates from the statues, nearly blinding those present. Finally, a massive divine manifestation of the goddess Gaia takes shape above the gathered students. As the students cast their eyes upward, they find themselves in a breathtaking scene, feeling as though they are drifting through space amidst a sea of vibrant magical spheres. The process of elemental selection begins, with the various forces choosing students one after another, leading to a mix of joy and regret among the crowd. The atmosphere turns tense when a violent vortex suddenly swirls around one particular freshman, signaling that he has successfully awakened 2 separate attributes. Upon closer inspection, the audience is stunned to find that it is Neil, the commoner. His ability to tap into magical power so effortlessly leaves many questioning if he is a true prodigy. Clearly thrilled, Neil celebrates his dual mastery of fire and earth by arrogantly demanding that the others submit to his strength. After his display of power, Neil glances back to find Lewis still lost in silent meditation. Although he tells himself that someone who hasn't even sensed an element is unworthy of being his rival, he secretly wishes for Lewis to succeed. The rest of the students also watch Lewis with growing anticipation, yet they are confused when no elemental energy appears to gather around him. Lewis himself is becoming increasingly aggravated by his inability to feel anything. He wonders if his status as an outsider to this world is the cause, as he feels trapped within a heavy, suffocating shadow. He knows this shouldn't be the case, recalling the faint sensation of magic he perceived during his earlier duel with Cain. Feeling as though a thick fog is obscuring his spiritual vision, Lewis refuses to be defeated by this mysterious barrier. His resolve hardens, and the sheer force of his willpower generates a burst of energy that clears the darkness away. Once his sight is restored, he finally perceives the brilliant elements dancing around him. Watching from a distance, the priest is shocked to see that the magical circle he used to isolate Lewis's mind has been shattered. He is left wondering how the boy managed to break through such a seal. However, Lewis's troubles are not over. When he tries to grasp the water element, it slips away from his touch. Despite being able to see and sense the elements now, he finds himself unable to actually connect with them, which only adds to his confusion and anger. Unbeknownst to him, he has fallen into another trap. The priest has secretly implemented a confinement circle, a specific spell intended to sever the link between a person's spirit and the elemental forces of the world. By utilizing forbidden ores and magical items designed to sever a person's connection to the elements, the priest has ensured that even if Lewis managed to see the elemental forces, he would never be able to touch them. It is clear that Lewis has already made powerful enemies who are committed to his downfall. The priest admits that while Lewis has a talent for offending people, he was happy to accept a bribe from one of those rivals to sabotage the boy. Now he watches and waits, hoping to see Lewis succumb to despair before the ceremony concludes. As the ritual draws to a close, the other students begin to filter out of the hall, whispering insults about Lewis. They mock him for acting superior earlier, labeling him a fraud who cannot even manage a basic elemental awakening. Suddenly, Kara speaks for the first time, gesturing toward the floor near Lewis and warning him that a trap has been set there. Acting quickly, Lewis strikes the ground and destroys a mat, uncovering a hidden magical orb. Kara simply tells him to hurry up before walking away. While Lewis offers a smile of gratitude, he finds himself questioning if this was truly a coincidence. A quick look at the priest's reaction suggests otherwise. Refusing to let the distraction stop him, Lewis stands and opens himself up to the elemental forces. In an instant, the colorful spheres throughout the hall rush toward him, forming a massive vortex that mirrors the one Neil created. The surrounding students are baffled, unable to comprehend how 2 commoners could possess such overwhelming power. The priest is equally stunned, wondering how a mere student could bypass both the forbidden ores and the confinement circle, a feat even a master should find impossible. His shock is interrupted when a hand lands firmly on his shoulder. Turning around, the priest finds himself face to face with an angry Principal Smith, who commands him to stand down and leave immediately. With no other choice, the priest retreats. Meanwhile, the students continue to gossip about the principal's sudden appearance. Some think he is merely checking on a failing student, while others suspect a deeper, more secretive tie between him and Lewis. Fuming over his failed scheme, the priest exits the hall and meets Jess, who has been waiting outside. The priest informs him that their plan was unsuccessful and advises that they avoid being seen together for the time being. Jess agrees to the distance, coldly stating that he will take care of the remaining matters himself. Jess is still fuming, yet his resolve to destroy Lewis remains unshaken. Meanwhile, the principal quietly instructs his trusted associate Kylie to monitor the priest, as he refuses to tolerate any outside interference within the school's walls. With the interference removed, the principal turns his full attention to Lewis, who is currently deep in a trance, connecting with several elements at once. In his mind, Lewis feels as if he has been transported to an entirely different realm, where he is surrounded by an incredible number of elemental forces. This experience brings back a conversation he had with Cain a few days prior. While staying at Cain's home, they had discussed how the goddess built the world on elemental foundations. Lewis had been puzzled as to why monsters are born with magical abilities, while humans require a ritual to unlock them. To explain this, Cain had shown him a magical crystal, noting that monsters possess these stones inside their bodies, which grants them an instinctive connection to magic from the moment they are born. In contrast, humans must be formally acknowledged by an element through an awakening ritual before they can cast spells by manipulating the world around them. Cain had emphasized that although elements are everywhere, they remain invisible to the human eye until this connection is made. Recalling these details, Lewis decides to test a theory and reaches out to a floating orb of water that seems to resonate with him. The moment he makes contact, he is hit by a tidal wave of sensations, ranging from the calm waters inhabited by sirens to the violent depths of the krakens. This massive influx of energy causes him agonizing pain, making him feel as though the goddess is pouring the very essence of the world into his body. The principal quickly recognizes that Lewis is in over his head and that the situation is spiraling out of control. To contain the fallout, he immediately casts a powerful goddess barrier to shield the hall. With Gaia's strength reinforcing the spell, a cage-like structure of elemental energy forms around Lewis to trap the raging storm of power. Inside the hall, the other students are left terrified and blind, unable to see through the brilliant light, but feeling the terrifying pressure of the energy the principal has sealed away. The principal tightly grips the shield, shouting for Lewis to find his focus and not let the surrounding chaos overwhelm him. Hearing the command, Lewis manages to collect himself, and the violent vortex gradually starts to settle. As he wipes a tear from his eye, he shudders at the thought of how close he came to losing his mind entirely. Upon closer inspection, Lewis finds the elements oddly familiar, noticing they behave much like the elementary particles from his previous world. He hypothesizes that if they function similarly, he might achieve extraordinary things by simply altering their frequencies. No sooner has the thought crossed his mind than a particle bursts open, triggering another surge of elemental energy. The principal watches in disbelief as a massive rainbow-colored tornado forms, a phenomenon unlike anything he has ever seen. While the students shake with fear at the sight of such raw power, even the principal admits the situation has gone far beyond his control. From the center of the storm, Lewis observes the elements with the curiosity of a scientist. He begins to suspect that if humans could simply master these frequencies, they could wield magic as effortlessly as monsters do. As the elements begin to enter his bloodstream, he reflects on the constant motion of particles. He discovers that by synchronizing this movement with his breathing and his internal chi, the elemental flow becomes much more fluid. He realizes that if he can maintain this equilibrium, he might eventually create a magic crystal within his own body to perform advanced spells. Suddenly, the leftover elements are drawn into his mind and absorbed. When Lewis finally opens his eyes, a snowflake pattern glimmers within them. Jagged icicles instantly materialize around him, shattering the protective barrier and erupting throughout the great hall. As the elemental surge lifts him into the air, the hall begins to freeze, causing terrified students to flee in every direction. Realizing the danger, the principal knows he must act quickly to contain the energy. He pulls a golden shield from beneath his cloak and offers a prayer to the goddess, asking for the power of fire. Holding the shield high, he releases a brilliant light and conjures a massive wall of flames that spreads throughout the academy. As the heat reaches Lewis, the ice encasing him starts to melt away. A magnificent flash of light then bursts from the great hall, illuminating the entire campus and leaving onlookers in the distance wondering what could have caused such a spectacular glow. Finally, Lewis descends back to the floor, leaving the principal to ponder what kind of element could have produced something so similar to ice. In the meantime, Lewis remains in a state of deep meditation. Within his mind, he watches as elemental particles swirl in the palm of his hand at a dizzying pace, gradually merging together. Through quick mental calculations, he deduces that combining the 4 primary elements in specific ways can trigger entirely new reactions. He observes the wind and water elements beginning to fuse, yet he feels lost regarding how to utilize this breakthrough. Realizing he is in desperate need of a mentor, Lewis decides it is time to return to reality. Opening his eyes, he finds the principal standing nearby and notices the wall of protective flames that has been shielding them. Once the principal dismisses the barrier, he asks Lewis if he truly understands the weight of his actions. Looking around at his nearly frozen classmates, Lewis realizes the gravity of the disaster he nearly caused. Overcome by embarrassment, he laughs nervously and admits that he created quite a mess, thanking the principal for intervening. The principal then instructs his associate, Kylie, to manage the aftermath while he takes Lewis to his office, inviting the boy to ask any questions he might have during the walk. Upon returning to the principal's office, Lewis feels as though the statue of Gaia is watching him with a stern expression. The principal offers his congratulations on successfully awakening every element, while Lewis drinks a calming potion to recover from his total exhaustion. To demonstrate his progress, Lewis summons the elements in his hands. The principal is visibly stunned. Seeing a fresh apprentice handle elemental energy with such fluidity is nearly unheard of, and he finds Lewis's natural talent to be truly remarkable. To aid his development, the principal hands Lewis a reference book on magic and advises him to study it with great care. He explains that since his own expertise lies in earth and wind magic, Lewis should seek out Faye and Miliana for help with fire and water, as their noble backgrounds grant them access to specialized techniques. Shortly after, the principal summons his apprentice, Kylie. To Lewis's surprise, the magical snake shifts its form into an attractive woman. The principal introduces them and explains that Kylie is now assigned as his personal protector. Suggesting a more private location for their discussion, Kylie leads the group to a deserted building. When Lewis asks about their destination, the principal clarifies that he uses the space for his own meditation and training, having reinforced the structure with earth magic to ensure it is both soundproof and durable. Finally, Kylie asks to see his abilities, and Lewis demonstrates how he accidentally manifested the ice element during his awakening ritual. Lewis clarifies that by speeding up and merging 2 distinct elements, a new force is created, which he has titled the ice element. This revelation leaves the principal speechless, as the concept of blending attributes is completely unheard of. Kylie, equally amazed, finds herself fascinated by the chilling aura and smiles before suddenly lunging at Lewis. Wanting to experience the power firsthand, she launches a series of rapid strikes, yet Lewis defends himself effortlessly with his magic. He even manages to land a counterattack that pushes her back, leading her to realize just how formidable the elemental fusion truly is. When Kylie asks if anyone has ever achieved this before, the principal confirms that it is a historical first. He explains that since the dawn of magic, countless prodigies have spent their lives trying to master its secrets, yet none ever managed to fuse elements. Most mages can only handle a single attribute. Even Lady Miriam, the Empire's most powerful saint and a rare genius, could only control 3 separate elements. When she tried to merge 2, the attempt nearly drove her insane, proving that the human body and mind typically cannot handle such a collision. The principal further explains that accelerating elements as Lewis does requires incredible mental strength to guide the energy safely. Attempting to force different elements to collide is usually fatal. Kylie begins to suspect that Lewis's potential might actually rival that of a saint, even if he doesn't realize it himself. Determined to push him further, she summons her fire attribute and initiates another duel. As they fight, the principal recounts how Lady Miriam once theorized that only a body as strong as a dragon's, or the use of monster-like magic crystals, could withstand such a process. When Lewis asks about the outcome of that theory, the principal describes the results as catastrophic. Every experiment ended in failure, eventually leading the Empire to ban the research as illegal and forbidden. It deeply shocks the principal to see someone finally break this ancient taboo. Lewis, meanwhile, deduces that he avoided internal injury by keeping the elements on separate mental pathways during his calculations. Kylie warns him against overconfidence, reminding him of the immense danger involved. Lewis acknowledges the risk, noting that while his unique abilities could cause problems, as they did in his past, he has no intention of letting them spiral out of control. Kylie concludes by explaining that she was hired to protect him, but since she prefers to avoid unnecessary trouble, she urges him to keep his abilities hidden. Lewis agrees, confirming that his ice element is simply a specialized application of the water attribute he summoned. When the principal asks for clarification on what he means by application, Lewis explains that his exceptionally strong willpower allows him to force water to turn into ice by applying immense pressure. To prove his point, he asks Kylie to strike again. As she lunges, Lewis utilizes his water magic. Under the extreme force he exerts, the liquid solidifies into an ice shield right before their eyes. Both Kylie and Principal Smith are left in a state of shock by this transformation. Lewis formally identifies this technique as superionic ice, a specialized form of the water element. Confused, Kylie asks how he managed to create ice that not only withstands her fire, but actually radiates heat. Lewis explains that since liquids change their state under high pressure, he simply used his scientific knowledge to replicate that process with magic. Principal Smith reflects on how much of the world remains a mystery. He encourages Lewis to visit him whenever he likes, promising to personally mentor him in the proper use of his abilities and even offering academic credit for any future discoveries. While Lewis is delighted by this opportunity, Kylie remains apprehensive. She questions if the principal is certain about protecting the boy, noting that such a phenomenon has never been documented and might have been a fluke. The principal counters that much of the magic currently found in textbooks started as a coincidence, and he refuses to ignore new possibilities. Accepting her superior's logic, Kylie prepares herself for the difficult task of guarding such a high-maintenance student. Before vanishing to attend to her other responsibilities, she vows to see the job through. To help Lewis recover, the principal provides a mental restoration potion, though he warns the boy not to rely on it too often. He advises Lewis to return to his room and rest before the first day of school tomorrow. Lewis is amazed that magic can even heal the mind as he drinks the mixture. Back at the dormitory, the potion keeps him wide awake, so he decides to spend the night meditating. Upon entering his room, he finds Kara still awake. When he asks if Kara had been waiting up for him, he expresses his sincere gratitude, acknowledging that Kara truly saved him earlier that day. Lewis mentions that the principal had asked how he noticed the rare artifact in the hall, but instead of answering, Kara simply hands him a business card for Gonda's trading company. It becomes clear to Lewis that Kara's vast knowledge stems from his background as a merchant's son. After quietly muttering a word of thanks, Kara leaves the room. Lewis realizes that the boy was simply returning the favor for being rescued on their first day, while also building a useful professional connection. The next morning, the freshmen assemble at the Candria Arcanus training hall to meet their new physical education teacher, Derek. Although Derek is there to teach the basics of martial arts, his creepy and unpleasant demeanor immediately makes the students uncomfortable. While most of his peers feel disgusted or intimidated, Lewis remains focused, admiring the instructor's perfectly conditioned physique and eager to learn how to master both his body and his mind. Derek immediately zeroes in on Lewis, moving behind him with such startling speed that even Kane feels a wave of intimidation. Lewis, however, senses the instructor's presence right away. Leaning in close, Derek praises Lewis's exceptional physical condition and expresses a strong interest in overseeing his training. While Lewis is naturally wary and slightly repulsed by the man's demeanor, Derek quickly shifts his attention to Kane. He mocks the boy's slender build, dismissively suggesting that he is all style and no substance. Though Kane is clearly irritated, the instructor moves on to begin the lesson. Following long-standing academy custom, the class starts with a demonstration by the upperclassmen. A group of seniors, including Jess, marches into the hall with an air of superiority. They openly criticize the new students, claiming that even the legendary noble families have lost their edge and become unreliable. Ignoring the annoyance felt by Lewis and Kane, Derek instructs the seniors to showcase their physical power. One student approaches a magic-enhanced weighted pec deck and effortlessly lifts a ton, leaving the freshmen feeling completely outmatched. Other seniors follow, demonstrating incredible feats such as high-speed spinning or running on treadmills while burdened by 250-kilogram leg weights. When Derek finally gives the freshmen a turn, he warns them to be careful, and most of them predictably struggle with the intense exercises. However, the atmosphere changes when the seniors notice Lewis. He handles the equipment as if it were a game, lifting 10 tons without effort, running so fast the treadmill threatens to break, and spinning with the force of a whirlwind. The observers are speechless, with some even whispering that he must be using illegal performance enhancers to achieve such results. Meanwhile, Neil is busy establishing his own dominance. He treats 15-ton weights like they are featherlight and jogs across the treadmill with a 20-ton block strapped to him as if he were taking a relaxing walk in the park. The other students watch in terror at this display of monstrous strength. Once he is done, Neil drops his heavy weights right in front of Lewis with a thunderous crash. To Neil, this is a clear declaration of his superiority. He looks Lewis in the eye, suggesting they ignore the others and finally settle the score between them. Lewis, however, doesn't view their relationship as a rivalry at all. In his eyes, Neil is simply an egomaniac obsessed with being the strongest person in the room, a realization that only makes Lewis more exhausted. Rubbing his forehead in frustration, Lewis reminds Neil that it is only their first day and that these basic drills are meant for nothing more than building endurance. He tells Neil that showing off in public is both useless and immature. Before the argument can go any further, Jess suddenly takes offense at Lewis's remark. Despite Lewis not even addressing him, Jess immediately takes offense, convinced the comment was a personal jab. With a dark, angry expression, he warns Lewis against getting too cocky just because he has a bit of physical strength. Jess argues that muscles matter very little in the grand scheme of things, as true power is derived from one's attributes. This piques Lewis's curiosity, leading him to ask for a clearer explanation of what these attributes actually are. Neil jumps in confidently, boasting that he was born with the dual attributes of fire and earth. This revelation leaves Jess momentarily speechless. He recognizes that a commoner possessing such a rare and powerful combination is nearly impossible. Shifting the focus, Neil asks Lewis which attribute he was granted, to which Lewis calmly identifies his as water. Upon hearing this, Jess erupts into mocking laughter, finding the choice of water to be pathetic. He jeers at Lewis, asking if he plans to defeat his enemies by making them slip on puddles. While Lewis is genuinely puzzled as to why water is seen as a joke, Miliana steps in to clarify the situation. She explains that water-based martial arts are generally viewed as the most basic of all elemental paths. Since its primary offensive move, the Aqua Blade, is better suited for defense or support than for destruction, users of this element are often looked down upon as inferior to those with more aggressive powers. Lewis remains quiet as he absorbs the fact that his attribute is held in such low regard. Seizing the opportunity to further humiliate him, Jess claims that no matter how physically fit Lewis is, a water attribute essentially guarantees a hopeless future. The circle of bullies joins in the laughter, with one smugly pointing out that history has never seen a water user reach the prestigious rank of Grandmaster. They mockingly suggest that Lewis should just accept his role as a background support for superior fighters. Displeased by their condescending tone, Lewis narrows his eyes and asks if they truly believe it is impossible for a water user to surpass the rank of master, even with the best training. Jess scoffs at the question, stating that it is simply a well-known fact of life. He sneers at Lewis, remarking that a commoner's ignorance of the world is exactly why someone like him has to explain the harsh reality of their society. Eventually, Kane's patience wears thin, and he snaps at the group in frustration. Faye also intervenes, sharply telling the bullies to be quiet since they clearly don't know what they are talking about. As the two sides trade insults, the argument becomes increasingly heated. Seeking to exploit the situation, Jess approaches the instructor and points out that upperclassmen should serve as examples for the freshmen. He then suggests a specific exercise focused on endurance, arguing that true magical mastery requires a body tough enough to withstand physical punishment. According to Jess, taking direct hits under pressure is the most effective way to force the body and mana to adapt. With a self-satisfied smile, Jess proposes a friendly sparring session to act as this endurance training, publicly stating his intent to prove exactly why the water attribute is worthless. While this is happening, Kane whispers a vital warning to Lewis, revealing that Jess is the older brother of the student Lewis had humiliated previously. He stresses that water attributes are famously poor at reinforcing the body's defenses, meaning Jess is likely planning to brutally beat him in front of the entire class. Despite the danger, Lewis seems unconcerned by Kane's anxiety. Instead, he addresses the teacher, calmly asserting his belief that no attribute is inherently better or worse than another. Taking this as an acceptance of the challenge, the instructor watches as Lewis confirms he will fight the seniors to prove their prejudices wrong. While the older students wait eagerly for the violence to start, Kane makes a final, desperate attempt to change Lewis's mind, but Lewis simply assures him that things will go well. The teacher then outlines the regulations for the bout. Magic is permitted only within the central ring, and the focus must remain on the physical strength they have developed. Furthermore, he emphasizes that dodging is strictly prohibited. Each fighter must stand firm and absorb every blow. Just as Jess and Lewis are ready to begin, A sudden burst of fire catches everyone's attention. Neil charges onto the scene, laughing manically as flames surround him. He shouts that his time has come, and that he is finally ready for a real battle, much to the annoyance of the senior students. A senior student, visibly enraged, steps forward and declares his intention to teach Neil a lesson in respect. Activating his earth attribute, he encases himself in dense armor and charges at a frightening pace, launching a strike that appears potentially lethal. However, before he can connect, Neil delivers a punch of such immense power that it shatters the senior's defenses and sends him soaring across the arena. The entire room is stunned by the display. Jess and his companions are left speechless, unable to comprehend how Neil managed to destroy one of the Academy's most reliable defensive abilities with just one hit. Seeking to end the humiliation, an insulted Jess commands the remaining seniors to swarm Neil and take him down together. Far from being intimidated, Neil seems delighted by the challenge. He dramatically rips off his shirt to reveal his muscular build before charging into the fray with a wild grin. To the onlookers' surprise, the seniors' attacks barely seem to register, while Neil's own counterstrikes are catastrophic. At one point, he hurls a student with such violence that the boy collides with several of his own teammates. During the chaos, a student specializing in earth magic spots an opening and strikes Neil's exposed back, certain that he has found a vulnerability. His confidence turns to horror when the impact shatters his own armor instead of hurting Neil. As the initial shock wears off, the senior screams in agony, realizing that Neil has the incredible ability to concentrate his mana into a single, indestructible point of contact. He is baffled that a mere freshman has already mastered such advanced mana control. Without giving him a chance to recover, Neil kicks him across the room, leaving him crumpled against a wall. Watching the one-sided brawl, the instructor appears completely uninterested. He calmly remarks to the class that even the most powerful warriors must master the basics, noting that those who neglect their fundamentals will end up just like the defeated students on the floor. Lewis, meanwhile, watches the violence with genuine concern, whispered to Kane that the beating Neil is delivering seems far too extreme. Before Kane can respond, a sudden threat emerges from the rear. Sensing the danger, both Kane and Faye immediately move to shield Lewis as another senior approaches them from the front. Furthermore, the group is determined to demonstrate to the upperclassmen that the new students are not merely helpless targets. Standing between his two allies, Lewis slowly raises his eyes to meet Jess's gaze from across the room. He calmly remarks that the moment for their primary confrontation has finally arrived. Jess responds with a sneer, accusing Lewis of being far too full of himself for thinking he is the main attraction. He insults the boy, calling him arrogant and oblivious to his true status. Proudly identifying himself as the heir to the prestigious House of Harry, Jess declares that he will show a commoner like Lewis the true meaning of noble dignity, which he believes is a virtue exclusive to the elite. As soon as he finishes his boast, Jess leaps into the air and plunges toward Lewis at high speed, unleashing a gale penetration strike with lethal intent. However, Lewis reacts instantly by conjuring a shield of ice above his head. The outcome leaves Jess in a state of shock. Not only does the barrier withstand the impact without a single crack, but the biting cold radiating from it is so fierce that he is forced to back away. Looking at his hands in disbelief, Jess realizes they are beginning to freeze just from touching the surface. He struggles to accept that such a terrifying force originated from water magic, though Lewis simply explains that it is a specialized application of the element. Nearby, Miliana and the other students watch with intense curiosity and confusion, having never witnessed water magic manipulated in such a strange and powerful way. Refusing to believe what is happening, Jess tells himself that Lewis must be using some sort of trick. Meanwhile, Brian mutters that this year's freshmen are nothing but a source of chaos. Jess decides that regardless of Lewis's abilities, he still intends to deliver a lesson. He shifts his attention toward Neil, who is still systematically defeating the other seniors, and charges at him. Neil is thrilled by the challenge, viewing Jess as his next target, but Jess skillfully evades Neil's powerful punch and mocks him for missing. For a few moments, Jess uses his superior speed to dance around Neil, yet his true goal is not to win this particular fight. Instead, he is using Neil as a screen to close the distance to Lewis. The moment an opening appears, Jess lunges toward Lewis with obvious murderous intent. Neil tries to intercept him with a head-on charge, but Jess maneuvers around the strike once more. In a sudden blur of movement, he reappears behind Lewis, ready to launch a deceptive sneak attack. Lewis successfully intercepts the strike by raising another shield of ice. He taunts Jess, pointing out the irony of a man who constantly preaches about honor and pride, yet relies entirely on cowardly sneak attacks. Lewis dismisses Jess's noble ideals as completely meaningless to him. In response, Jess argues that as a member of the nobility, he simply makes the tactical choices required to win, claiming that victory is his natural destiny. Even as the duel continues, the two of them continue to trade sharp insults and playful remarks. The situation becomes even more chaotic when Neil, visibly annoyed by their interaction, leaps into the center of the fray and launches a sudden attack. Lewis barely manages to move out of the way, feeling confused because Neil is technically his ally. Furthermore, the frustration of being trapped in a 2-on-1 fight is starting to get to him. Thinking he has found an opening while Lewis is distracted, Jess lunges forward again, but Neil catches him at the last moment and violently shoves him back. As Jess is sent flying, he fumes at Neil's reckless and insane behavior. Neil shouts back, telling Jess to stop underestimating him and to realize that working together is their best bet for success. With Jess temporarily sidelined, Neil turns his gaze toward Lewis with a wild look in his eyes, declaring that with the annoying noble out of the way, they can finally fight one-on-one. The instructor observes the pair with great interest, noting that their combat styles, built on speed, precision, and tight movements, mark them both as true martial geniuses. He even considers the possibility that they might one day exceed William's own skill level. The battle continues with Lewis dodging a barrage of blows until he manages to seize Neil's arm and land a direct punch to his throat. Stunned by the hit to his weak point, Neil gasps for air. This move infuriates Faye, who screams at Lewis for using such a dangerous and potentially lethal technique. However, Lewis's brief distraction allows Neil to grab his hand. With a look of pure rage, Neil tells Lewis that he is finally going to experience real pain. He delivers a powerful headbutt, muttering that a person like Lewis has no business fighting him as an equal and promising that the real beating is only beginning. Lewis looks at him with a cold expression, reminding Neil that school regulations strictly forbid students from intentionally causing serious harm, a line he believes Neil has already stepped over. At that very moment, Lewis allows his water element to surge, and a flood of liquid begins to swirl around him. Neil watches the display with curiosity but remains arrogant, convinced that basic water magic could never hope to stop him. Since the instructor previously noted that this drill was designed to evaluate their physical resilience, Neil refuses to retreat or dodge the incoming strike. Lewis is entirely unbothered by his opponent's bravado and calmly offers to provide something even more powerful if that is what Neil desires. Immediately after he speaks, the surrounding water solidifies into ice, encasing Neil's frame. The agonizing cold is nearly too much to bear, forcing Neil to ignite his fire attribute to frantically melt the frozen prison. Once he is liberated, his expression becomes even more deranged. He sports a manic grin and insists that the fight continue, claiming that clashing with Lewis is actively making him more powerful. This obsession with suffering traces back to a night in Neil's childhood when he was drinking from a river, struggling to cope with a mysterious burning pain in his body. In the darkness, he was ambushed by a pack of wolves that began to maul him. Despite being a small child, he showed terrifying strength by prying a wolf's jaws open to free his arm. Driven into a bloodthirsty frenzy by the pain, he slaughtered the entire pack with his bare hands. That traumatic event reshaped his worldview. He concluded that pain is the ultimate proof of life, and that only the strong deserve to survive. To Neil, enduring agony is the only way to define his existence and increase his power. In the present, Neil charges at Lewis once more, claiming they are identical, two monsters in a constant pursuit of greater strength. Lewis counters this by focusing his concentration and physical force into a devastating kick to Neil's face. Although the hit is perfect, Neil's obvious enjoyment of the impact only serves to irritate Lewis further. He launches a relentless series of strikes, hitting Neil repeatedly, yet Neil simply grins and welcomes the punishment. Watching from the sidelines, Faye and Kane are deeply unsettled, fearing that Lewis might actually end up killing Neil. What scares them most is how Neil's aura becomes increasingly dangerous and wild as the beating continues. Realizing the fight has spiraled out of control, they decide to intervene before something irreversible happens. Nevertheless, Neil remains defiant, shouting that their duel is far from over as he lunges at Lewis, who swiftly maneuvers out of the way. While trying to figure out a way to restrain the madman without breaking any school regulations, Lewis faces a difficult internal dilemma. He considers whether completely freezing Neil in place might finally be enough to stop him. After advising Neil to settle down, Lewis delivers a heavy blow to his midsection and immediately follows up with a technique called Ice Tempest, which pins Neil against the wall in a frozen casing. Yet again, Neil manages to escape by activating his fire attribute to melt the ice. Observing the chaos, the instructor finally begins to look intrigued, as the duel has only just reached a level he considers entertaining. Even after falling to the ground, Neil refuses to give up, insisting that he isn't satisfied yet and challenging Lewis to strike him with even more power. The situation takes an unexpected turn when a sudden, immense force slams Neil into the floor before he can move. As he loses consciousness, he sees Kylie standing over him. She coldly remarks that he has crossed the line, labeling him a mindless fool who lacks self-control. The instructor's demeanor changes instantly upon seeing Kylie. It is clear he is infatuated with her as he becomes visibly excited and notes that she looks more beautiful than ever. He is entirely captivated by the powerful aura she emits, but Kylie quickly dismisses his enthusiasm. She brings him back to reality by asking how he intends to explain it if a student were to die on the very first day of school. Reminding him of the principal's prior warnings, she watches as the embarrassed teacher tries to justify his actions. He argues that he isn't some irresponsible or entitled person and claims his goal was simply to reveal the student's true potential through fighting. Kylie mocks his explanation, telling him he should hope his behavior is just due to stupidity. She emphasizes that she has been specifically assigned to guard Lewis and warns the instructor to consider the weight of that responsibility. Furthermore, she informs him that the principal expects him in his office as soon as the lesson concludes, making the teacher realize he is in for a serious lecture. Despite the looming trouble, the instructor looks at the freshmen and reflects on their incredible talent. In his mind, Lewis, Faye, and Kane are clearly the most promising of the bunch. Finally, he tells Neil to get dressed, warning the boy that his insane behavior will be excused only this once. The instructor warns Neil that any future instances of losing control will lead to a reduction in his academic credits. However, Neil is too preoccupied with his own thoughts to pay much attention. He reflects on the fact that he was able to endure strikes from someone with the skill of a master, but he also acknowledges a more practical problem: the constant cost of replacing the clothes he destroys during battle. Realizing he might soon run out of money, he decides that hunting monsters is the only way to fund his wardrobe. When the bell rings, the teacher ends the session and dismisses the class. He grants the seniors permission to leave while instructing the freshmen to focus on their recovery by resting and taking potions. Before they depart, he gives them a stern warning to prepare for even more intense training, advising them not to complain when the difficulty increases. As they walk away, Kane mentions that it is incredibly rare for freshmen to beat upperclassmen, noting it has almost never happened in the school's century-long history. Lewis finds this interesting, as he doesn't recall seeing such records in the official academy files. Kane elaborates, explaining that this has only occurred 3 times, and in each instance, those specific classes produced multiple grandmasters. When Lewis asks about the most recent occurrence, Kane reveals that it happened back when their own fathers were students. Even they had managed to overcome the seniors during their first year. In another part of the school, the injured and embarrassed seniors retreat to their classroom. One student offers an apology to Jess for their failure, admitting that the strength of Lewis and Neil is simply overwhelming. He suggests that they should perhaps resort to underhanded tactics to deal with the pair, but Jess immediately shuts down the idea. He insists on defeating them in a fair and public manner to prove he is the strongest, as he believes that status is his birthright. Jess tells his friend to be patient, confident that many opportunities for vengeance will arise. He remains convinced that regardless of their raw power, Lewis and Neil are just ordinary citizens, whereas the nobility truly dictates the Empire's future. Meanwhile, Faye discusses the day's events with Miliana, asking for her opinion on Lewis's abilities. She describes his proficiency with water magic as incredible and encourages Miliana to train with him, suggesting it could be a great way for her to improve her own skills. Miliana remains quiet, lost in thought as she considers the immense and unusual power Lewis displayed through his magic. Deep down, Miliana experiences a sense of doubt, feeling that she could never truly mimic his unique abilities. Her own water attribute skills seem entirely insufficient when compared to his, despite her efforts to train alongside him. Since no one had ever successfully manipulated water magic in such unconventional and dominant ways before his arrival, she concludes that she must urgently develop new offensive techniques that better suit her own style. When Faye questions why she is putting so much pressure on herself at only 16, Miliana softly explains that her primary motivation is to bring pride to her family. Faye, having anticipated this very response, calls out to Lewis and informs him that Miliana has something to say. As soon as Faye makes the announcement, the surrounding students fix their eyes on Miliana, causing her to feel increasingly anxious. Most of the onlookers mistakenly assume she is about to deliver a public confession of love, which is far from her actual intention. Once Lewis approaches, Faye clarifies that she wants him to share some of his water magic expertise with Miliana. Lewis, being a naturally helpful person, agrees immediately and remarks that he would be delighted to assist a friend. However, the mention of friendship seems to leave Miliana feeling oddly conflicted, a reaction that Lewis clearly notices. In a quiet moment, Miliana admits that her presence might eventually bring complications into his life, and she expresses a hope that he won't one day wish they had never met. Lewis reassures her firmly, stating that he could never regret being friends with the people he values. This response deeply touches Miliana, yet she quickly insists that she doesn't want to involve him in her personal struggles. Overwhelmed, she suddenly flees the scene, leaving the rest of the group in a state of confusion. Faye follows her at once, offering Lewis a quick apology and promising to check on her friend. As they leave, Lewis reflects on the fact that everyone around him seems to be carrying their own heavy burdens. Ironically, he wonders if he might actually be the one who ends up bringing trouble to Miliana, instead of the other way around. Seeking more information, he asks Kane about her history. Kane reveals that Miliana belongs to the Royce family and is the granddaughter of a renowned grandmaster. He notes that the family was once incredibly prosperous and influential, particularly during her grandmother's lifetime. Following the death of her grandmother, the family's influence and social standing began to decline. Kane admits that his knowledge of the subsequent events is limited, suggesting that Faye likely possesses much more information regarding the matter. When Lewis turns to Kara for more details, he learns that the Royce family eventually came into conflict with the Arcanist Association. This revelation piques his interest, leading him to wonder if the problems Miliana alluded to are linked to this organization. However, Kara shakes her head, confessing that she has no further information to share. Lewis concludes that if he wants the full story, he will eventually have to speak with Faye or Miliana himself. The following day, the freshmen assemble at the Academy's primary magic training field. Their professor begins the lesson by describing magic as a divine gift from the goddess and the fundamental core of existence. He explains that the course will focus on the proper management of magic and the application of martial arcane in battle before introducing himself as Mr. Sid. Despite his earlier enthusiasm for the class, Lewis appears noticeably annoyed, which prompts Kane to ask what is bothering him. Lewis whispers that while he is still eager to learn, he gets the distinct impression that the professor already has a grudge against him. Proving Lewis right, Mr. Sid suddenly appears right before him and coldly remarks that students should remain silent while he is talking. He expresses a clear distaste for anyone he considers rude or foolish in his presence. Without a second thought, the professor deducts 1 credit from Lewis's account, warning him that unlike some unthinking individuals, students are expected to follow the rules. He adds that if Lewis continues to ignore the regulations, he will eventually run out of credits entirely. Shortly after, Mr. Sid takes away another credit, accusing the boy of being vulgar and insolent, even though Lewis has remained perfectly respectful. Understanding that he is being intentionally targeted, Lewis decides to stay quiet. Before moving on, Mr. Sid suggests that Lewis should study noble culture and manners if he hopes to be seen as a respectable student. To begin the practical demonstration, the professor raises his hand, causing a massive knight made of sand to burst from the earth through a magical technique. As Kane and Lewis watch the enormous figure in awe, Mr. Sid clarifies that real combat requires a perfect balance of magic and physical skill. He concludes that to truly become an apprentice, one must first master the ability to shape their mana into a weapon. The professor notes that after students master the basics, they can learn to envelop their entire bodies in arcane armor. Mr. Sid then demonstrates this by manifesting a sword made of mana in his right hand, explaining that such a skill is essential to becoming a genuine warrior. To manage mana effectively, one must synchronize their thoughts with their physical movements, guiding the energy through precise actions. With a quick flourish, the instructor slashes at the massive sand knight, cutting the construct in two. This display of destructive force leaves the students in awe of martial arcane's potential. Mr. Sid then announces that they will later test their skills on stone statues, promising 5 extra credits to whoever inflicts the most damage. But first, he intends to provide proper instruction on magical attacks. The class is instructed to organize into groups according to their specific attributes, though Neil is exempt from joining one due to his dual powers. Meanwhile, the water attribute students are ordered to move to the side to focus on arcane armor and help with warm-up drills instead of attacking. As the groups separate, Kane, Miliana, Faye, and Lewis head to their designated areas. Almost instantly, students from other sections begin jeering at Miliana, mockingly calling water users human punching bags. This forced transition to a support role in the corner deeply embarrasses her, especially since others are getting the chance to strike the statues. Her frustration intensifies as she worries that her dream of becoming a grandmaster is slipping away. In her distress, Miliana whispers to herself about wanting to prove her worth to a certain person, leading Louis to wonder if she is referring to someone in the Arcanist Association. When he asks what is bothering her, she flushes with embarrassment and claims it is nothing relevant to him. Louis, while preparing for the drill, silently questions her obsession with offensive power. From his view, water magic is naturally superior for supporting allies and hindering enemies, tasks that are vital in any fight. However, Miliana firmly counters this, explaining that her goal is to regain her family's prestige by becoming a grandmaster. To do so, she believes she must be capable of both offense and defense, insisting that the goddess would never create a flawed attribute and that powerful attacking techniques for water must exist somewhere. Driven by her conviction, Miliana had spent years attempting to enhance her Aqua Blade technique with magical potions and by experimenting with multi-strike variations. Yet, despite her tireless dedication, she found herself unable to compensate for the inherent lack of destructive force in water magic. This struggle led her to a growing internal dread that a water user might truly be incapable of attaining the rank of Grandmaster. As she wrestled with these thoughts, a classmate approached her, announcing that he needed to warm up for his upcoming turn using her support skills. Miliana obliged by surrounding him with a protective water shield, but the relentless impact of his practice strikes soon began to drain her energy and wear down her body. Observing her exhaustion, Lewis reflected deeply on the limitations of the water element and the path to becoming a grandmaster. The scene triggered painful memories of his past life, where he was frequently ridiculed for his disabilities. People had mocked him for studying martial arts while he could barely walk and suffered from severe asthma. He remembered the bullies who called him pathetic, those who stole his research, and the cruel voices telling him to give up on his impossible dreams and simply die. Seeing Miliana's struggle, Louis recognized a kindred spirit who understood her flaws but refused to surrender. Like Cain, she kept moving forward regardless of the insults thrown her way. Inspired, Louis decided it was time to reveal an entirely different approach to water-based martial arts. Suddenly stepping in, Louis manifested a formidable ice shield that sent the annoying student tumbling backward. He turned to Miliana, asserting that he shared her belief in the potential of their element and asking her to watch his next move closely. Miliana, flustered by his sudden proximity, asked him with a slight blush if he was really serious about what he was doing. Ignoring the skepticism of the crowd, Louis called out to Mr. Sid, requesting a chance to strike one of the statues. Clearly annoyed, Mr. Sid warned him that failure would result in further credit deductions. He sarcastically questioned why Louis would waste his unique ice magic on such a durable target, advising him to stick to fundamental mana control instead. Louis remained composed, stating that he had developed a superior method for boosting the offensive output of water attributes. This claim was met with immediate, widespread laughter from the other students, who found the idea ridiculous. Even Miliana expressed her concern, reminding him that the statues were not ordinary stone, but rare artifacts heavily reinforced with powerful earth magic. Miliana warns him that standard water spells wouldn't even leave a mark on the statues, expressing her fear that a failure will cost him his remaining credits. Lewis, however, remains unbothered and reassures her that he has a strategy in place. Walking toward the massive stone knight, he picks up a handful of sand. He recalls an ancient principle from his past life, suggesting that soft materials can eventually defeat hard ones. He reasons that by mixing high-pressure water with abrasive sand and firing the mixture at an incredible velocity, he can create a stream capable of slicing through almost any surface. Putting his theory into practice, Lewis unleashes the attack, which instantly reduces the statue to a pile of rubble. Mr. Sid is left staring at the wreckage of his artifact in total shock, while Lewis calmly explains that this represents the genuine potential of the water element. Later that night, as the trio heads back to their quarters, Cain enthusiastically recounts the day's events. He laughs about how satisfying it was to see Mr. Sid's reaction when Lewis secured those extra credits, describing the professor's miserable expression as a total masterpiece. According to Kane, the man looked like he was living through a nightmare, his face turning as pale as if he'd eaten something spoiled before he hurried out of the classroom the moment the bell rang. Lewis casually remarks that he was too absorbed in his magical experiment to even notice the teacher's face, adding that it wasn't worth his attention anyway. Shifting the conversation back to their training, Kane suggests they seriously look into Faye's idea of working with Miliana. He notes that she is pushing herself to the limit to forge a new path, even spending a fortune on mental recovery potions and planning to hire private rooms for extra practice. Kane argues that teaming up with her would likely be a smart move for Lewis as well. Kara chimes in with the financial details, explaining that while a training room costs 30 silver, those specialized potions can run as high as 300 gold coins. These figures stun Lewis, who hadn't realized how expensive such training could be. After a brief pause, he asks Kara for a specific favor regarding the upcoming mission scheduled for the next few days. The three friends continue to speculate about the challenges of the mission as they finally arrive back at the dorms. The next day, the instructor assembles the class on the academy grounds to deliver an encouraging speech. He notes with satisfaction that their physical condition is improving daily, and seeing their progress, announces that they are officially prepared for their first academy missions. He emphasizes that these tasks are not just duties, but vital chances for them to develop their skills. The teacher explains that Candria Arcanist Academy borders the vast Mondo Great Forest to the west. While this forest was once a land of nightmare monsters, it has evolved into a natural boundary between several powerful nations. Dangerous creatures still roam its depths, with their strength increasing the closer one gets to the center. Conversely, the monsters near the edges are relatively weak. Since the academy was originally established to protect the Empire from forest threats, students are frequently sent to clear out these weaker creatures on the outskirts. Any magic crystals recovered from defeated monsters can be traded for credits or prizes upon their return, and a special bonus will be awarded to the student who collects the most. However, he warns that being reckless comes at a price. Anyone needing a teacher's rescue after picking a fight they cannot win will be docked 1 credit. Following the briefing, the students are dismissed to get ready. Neil is clearly thrilled, viewing this as his first real opportunity to fight without holding back. At the same time, Faye asks Lewis if he really intends to use these life-or-death situations to train Miliana. Lewis calmly points out that a person's true potential is revealed much more clearly in actual combat than in a safe classroom. Agreeing with this logic, the group decides to form a 5-person team, believing that collaboration and practical experience will be much more effective than spending a fortune on private training facilities. When Faye asks Miliana for her opinion, she is surprised to see that Miliana is genuinely eager to participate. Shortly after, the teacher clarifies that each freshman group will be paired with several upperclassmen. This setup is designed to keep the new students safe while allowing them to gain insights from those with more experience. During the preparations, Lewis spots Jess watching him from a distance. Jess approaches and remarks coldly on their habit of crossing paths. He reminds Lewis that these missions can be lethal and sarcastically warns him to stay alive. Lewis simply replies that facing danger is the only way for a person to truly grow. Irritated by his confidence, Jess clicks his tongue and walks away, muttering about Lewis's arrogance. After Jess walks away, he secretly instructs his companions to withhold any assistance from the newcomers should a conflict arise during their task. At the same time, Kane quietly cautions Lewis about the nature of their supervision. While instructors do monitor the groups from a distance, they almost never step in unless it is a matter of life or death. He shares his suspicion that some of the upperclassmen might deliberately lead them into the deep woods to encounter more formidable beasts just to spite them. Lewis, however, remains unconcerned, noting that tougher enemies yield more precious crystals, which translates to more profit and higher academic standing. As the various teams make their way into the dense trees, Louis and Kane discuss the history of the woods. Louis wonders if any ancient, powerful entities still haunt the area, but Kane reassures him that the local saints eliminated the most significant threats ages ago. He believes that at most, they might stumble upon a fighter-class creature if they are lucky. The senior tasked with overseeing their group overhears this and finds their confidence laughable. From his perspective, it takes a coordinated team of seasoned warriors to handle a fighter-class beast, making the freshmen's casual attitude seem dangerously ignorant. The situation changes abruptly when a massive fighter-class grand bear blocks their path. Even the supervisor is taken aback by the creature's presence, yet instead of stepping in to lead, He quickly retreats into the safety of the tree branches to watch. He gleefully thinks that this is an ideal opportunity to see the arrogant students get overwhelmed by a monster far beyond their level. While he sits comfortably above, reflecting on the bear's legendary endurance and impenetrable hide, Lewis is visibly annoyed by the senior's cowardice. Refusing to panic, Lewis immediately commands his team to form a battle line. As the beast lets out a thunderous roar, the five friends draw their weapons and launch a coordinated strike. Faye leads the charge with her spear, followed by Kane, who attempts to use his latest martial arts move from the rear. However, the impact leaves Kane stunned. The bear's flesh feels as indestructible as solid rock. When the creature swings back in retaliation, Kane is forced to use every bit of his strength just to block the blow and stay on his feet. Faye immediately follows up with a second charge, as Kara strikes from a different direction. Watching the group coordinate their efforts in a real-life battle fills Louis with pride, as he is glad to see his friends cooperating so effectively. Despite their teamwork, the relentless pressure eventually draws the Grand Bear's attention toward Louis and Miliana. Reacting quickly, Miliana uses her water magic to pin the beast down. She then blends her elemental control with a martial arts maneuver, tossing the massive predator through the air with the force of a bowling ball. Louis is caught off guard, admitting he has never witnessed such a move. Faye clarifies that it is Miliana's own invention, a specialized fusion of water magic and jujitsu. Louis is truly impressed by her creativity and initiative. Motivated by Miliana's display, Louis decides to show off his own progress and rushes toward the creature. He lands a powerful kick directly against its chest, near the heart, which sends the massive bear tumbling backward. Without pause, he conjures a sphere of highly compressed water and fires it at the target. Upon contact, the sphere detonates with enough violence to knock the monster out of the fight. Miliana is stunned by the carnage, noting that even mages with more aggressive elements struggle to wound a grand bear. Yet Lewis has caused severe damage using only water. Lewis calmly attributes his success to science, explaining that when water is compressed, superheated, and then released, the resulting steam can cause internal burns and paralyze a target's breathing. He points out that while skin can be tough, internal organs are far more vulnerable. Miliana listens intently, treating his explanation like a vital lecture and wondering if she can adapt these concepts to her own fighting style. Shortly after the explanation, Louis presents her with a specialized magical ring from the Candace Trading Company, which he had secretly obtained with Kara's assistance. This artifact allows Miliana to temporarily tap into earth, fire, and wind magic in addition to her own water attribute, mimicking Louis's versatile combat style. Louis explains that he got the idea after observing the various rings Mr. Sid used during their lessons, which inspired him to find a way for Miliana to experiment with multiple elements too. Miliana is deeply moved by the thoughtful gesture, but her joy is cut short when a sudden blast of fire streaks toward her, prompting a frantic warning from Louis. Fortunately, Miliana spots the incoming strike at the 11th hour and manages to dodge certain death by a hair's breadth. Even after escaping, she remains in a state of shock, reflecting on the staggering amount of power contained within that single blast. The entire group quickly shifts their focus toward the source of the attack. Nearby, the senior hidden in the trees is equally stunned. The fighter-class Grand Bear has been completely obliterated, as if the creature had never existed at all. The peace is short-lived, as Louis and his companions suddenly feel a massive presence advancing through the woods. Enormous trees begin to sway and tremble under the weight of whatever is approaching. Out of the darkness, several terrifying monsters known as Blaze Kongs emerge. These are giant, ape-like beasts fueled by fire and a natural, deep-seated insanity. Recognizing the danger, Kane remarks that they are in a dire situation. When Louis asks for more details about these creatures, Kane explains that Blaze Kongs should never be this close to the Academy. He notes that while seeing just one would be cause for alarm, encountering an entire pack is almost inconceivable. The horror intensifies as the Blaze Kongs begin to feast on the remains of the Grand Bear. The gruesome spectacle leaves Miliana on the verge of vomiting, and the other students find it equally difficult to witness. They soon realize that if these monsters are here, the other groups deeper in the forest must also be in grave peril. Their suspicions are confirmed almost instantly. Across the forest, every group finds itself face to face with Blaze Kongs. Since no one is prepared for such a high-level threat, a wave of panic erupts as students desperately search for their instructors. Even the teachers are caught off guard, struggling to understand the sudden surge of casualties and the overall chaos. In the midst of this terror, Neil remains the only one unfazed. He stands before a Blaze Kong with a manic laugh, asking the beast if it truly intends to challenge him. Rather than being afraid, his face lights up with excitement as he prepares for the fight. While the rest of the student body flees for their lives, Lewis contemplates the bigger picture. He concludes that if creatures this out of place have suddenly appeared, there must be a far more dangerous conspiracy unfolding behind the scenes. High up in the trees, the hiding senior suddenly freezes as he realizes one of the Blaze Kongs has spotted him. Overcome by panic, he hastily reinforces his body with soil armor, yet his heart still races with terror. The protection proves insufficient. The monster delivers a single bone-shattering punch that nearly crushes him. As the beast prepares to finish him off with a lethal stomp, Lewis intervenes, launching a powerful kick to the creature's face that sends it tumbling backward. Lewis immediately commands Kara and Miliana to retrieve the wounded senior and retreat, an order they follow without delay. Despite their frantic pleas for him to flee alongside them, Lewis reassures them that he will follow shortly. The humiliated Blaze Kong is driven into a blind rage by the counterattack. Consumed by fury, the beast opens its jaws and hurls a massive fireball at the group, prompting Lewis to shout a warning for everyone to find cover. The resulting explosion is so fierce that Miliana and Kara narrowly escape with their lives. Witnessing the intensity of the flames, Faye realizes that these creatures are not merely attacking, they are actively trying to execute them. Kane agrees that their only path to survival is to stand their ground together. Enhancing his speed with wind magic, Kane blurs toward the monster and manages to land a shallow but effective strike with his dagger. While Kane distracts the beast, Faye lunges forward with her spear, successfully gouging its arm before a second strike forces the massive creature to the ground. Kane is stunned by the raw power behind her maneuvers. Seizing the opening, Faye activates her sacred spear technique, unleashing a move called Crescent Fall that swirls like a tornado directly toward the Blaze Kong's heart. For a fleeting second, victory seems certain. However, the monster's eyes snap open, and Faye realizes to her horror that it has reinforced its body with crystal magic. Undeterred, she drives her spear through the creature's chest, causing a violent magical eruption. Standing over the fallen beast, Faye feels a brief surge of pride for having defeated such a monster. This satisfaction vanishes instantly when Kane screams at her to stay alert. Turning around, she finds the Blaze Kong looming over her, seemingly unfazed by her previous attacks. The creature opens its mouth to unleash a devastating stream of fire directly at her, but Louis leaps into the line of fire at the last possible moment, shielding them both behind a wall of ice. In a swift countermove, Louis conjures colossal spears of ice that burst from the earth, encasing the Blaze Kong in frozen layers. This provides the group with a much-needed, albeit brief, moment of respite. While Faye expresses her gratitude, she remains baffled by how the beast could still be alive after her spear had driven through its heart. Louis, however, is too preoccupied to respond. His gaze is locked on the monster, sensing that it is already preparing another searing breath attack. Acting on instinct, he jerks Faye out of harm's way just as the creature shatters its icy prison. To the group's collective horror, the wounds Kane and Faye had previously inflicted begin to close and vanish almost instantly. They are stunned by this development, as nothing they had heard about the aggressive nature of Blaze Kongs mentioned such a frightening level of regenerative power. Observing the monster's recovery, Louis is struck by a familiar pattern. The creature seems to thrive on pain and conflict, much like Neil does. Deep in the forest, the instructor finds himself in an increasingly desperate struggle against several of the apes. He grows frustrated as the beasts heal from every injury, seemingly becoming more powerful with each exchange. He realizes that these are not ordinary monsters and fears that the students will be massacred if the situation persists. The peril becomes even more acute for Lewis's group as more Blaze Kongs emerge from the shadows, slowly encircling them. Despite their best efforts to hold their ground, Miliana and Kara are eventually wounded in the fray. Meanwhile, the injured senior finally wakes up, but instead of showing fear, he wears a dark, satisfied grin. He believes his goal has been achieved and is content to let these defective monsters wipe out Louis and the other commoners. The terrifying reality is revealed. The entire nightmare had been orchestrated by the senior from the start. In front of Louis, the Blaze Kongs grow even more frenzied. Kane watches in shock as the monsters begin to manifest martial arcane armor, mimicking the techniques of highly trained warriors. As Louis fights to parry their relentless assaults, a chilling realization hits him. The creatures are prioritizing him as their main target. Suddenly, one of the apes gathers an immense amount of energy, forming a fireball as large as a small sun and aiming it directly at Louis. Simultaneously, the surrounding blaze kongs each manifest their own enormous fireballs. Both Faye and Kane scramble toward Louis, intent on shielding him from the impending barrage at any cost. A second later, a colossal explosion rips through the heart of the forest, detonating with a level of violence that looks like a nuclear strike. Observing the inferno from his vantage point, the senior grins, certain that he has finally succeeded in eliminating his target. Yet, Lewis is far more resilient than his enemies anticipated. From the center of the searing heat, brilliant rays of blue light suddenly pierce through the smoke and fire. Even the frenzied blaze kongs pause, baffled by the strange glow radiating from the wreckage. A powerful vortex then erupts, completely dousing the flames that had engulfed the area. Recognizing the familiar blue energy, Faye and Kane are struck by the realization that Lewis has not only survived one of the most lethal attacks ever faced by a freshman, but he has also emerged more formidable than ever. Faye notes with shock that manipulating mana over such a wide area through sheer willpower is a feat usually reserved for masters. It finally dawns on Kane that Louis has been masking his true capabilities this entire time. Inside the storm, Lewis reflects on the immense physical toll this effort is taking. By forcing his mana to circulate at an extreme pace, he has temporarily pushed his control to a master's level. However, the internal pressure is becoming agonizing, and he realizes he is rapidly approaching his breaking point. Knowing he must finish the fight immediately, he combines his specialized breathing technique with his ice magic to conjure a massive tidal wave. The surging water swallows the blaze kongs, leaving them disoriented and panicked. In a flash, the water solidifies into a forest of jagged icicles. Using the frozen terrain to his advantage, Lewis blurs across the battlefield at frightening speeds. He lunges at one of the creatures, delivering a strike so heavy it sends the massive ape soaring through the air. When another beast attempts to retaliate, Louis effortlessly parries the blow using his axiom acceleration before striking two other targets simultaneously. He moves so fast that the monsters lose track of his position. He is a ghost that appears beside them only to vanish and strike from another angle entirely. However, his movements are not random. As he darts across the field, Lewis is secretly carving a massive 8-trigram pattern into the earth beneath their feet. Each of the blaze kongs finds itself trapped at a specific point within the formation Louis has designed. Using his mastery over ice, Louis freezes every monster in place at the exact same moment. He then leaps high into the sky, raining down a constant series of palm strikes that drive the beasts deeper into his icy trap. This frozen structure seals them so tightly that there is no hope of escape. After landing, Louis watches his creation in silence until cracks suddenly begin to spiderweb across the surface. Within seconds, the massive prison shatters, and every monster inside is reduced to small fragments, much like a toy set being smashed into pieces. From his hiding spot, the senior is consumed by fury as he realizes that Lewis has once again defied the odds and survived. Nearby, Kane and Faye are left speechless, struggling to process how their friend managed to wipe out an entire pack of such dangerous creatures almost instantly. As the dust settles, Louis notices a peculiar change. Both wind and water mana seem to react to him with newfound ease, as if his control over them has evolved. When he finally joins his friends on the ground, Kane offers his congratulations, admitting he never dreamed that ice techniques could be so devastating. However, Faye cuts the celebration short, telling them to stop acting like fools and focus on leaving before they are ambushed again. Louis agrees, noting that since the instructors have finally arrived to help, it is the perfect moment to pull back. Realizing that the arrival of reinforcements makes it impossible to continue his scheme, the hidden senior acts fast. He delivers a heavy blow to his own chest to simulate an injury and collapses, hoping to be found as just another victim of the chaos. Shortly after, the principal arrives in person, commanding the staff to prioritize student safety and eliminate the remaining monsters. The group is shocked to see the principal himself on the front lines. He approaches Louis and the others to ensure they are unharmed, and Kane quickly credits their survival to Lewis's actions. Faye supports this, explaining that Louis took down several master-class blaze kongs single-handedly. The principal is visibly baffled by the report, knowing that defeating such powerful monsters alone is a staggering feat. Lewis, however, is more concerned with the nature of the attack, telling the principal that the entire event felt highly suspicious. To prove his point, he presents a frozen shard from one of the defeated apes. After a quick inspection of the fragment, the principal's expression turns serious. He instructs the students to head back to the academy immediately while he stays behind to investigate the matter personally. Upon entering a shop in the academy market, Louis is informed by the shopkeeper that his successful mission has earned him a staggering amount of academy credits. However, she expresses concern over his decision to spend his wealth on a massive supply of mental recovery potions, cautioning him that excessive use could have dire consequences for his health. Louis acknowledges the danger, but remains firm in his choice. Their conversation is interrupted by Kylie, who pulls him aside to discuss a grave matter. She explains that a forensic analysis of the Blaze Kong remains confirmed his earlier suspicions. Investigators found evidence of alchemical tampering, artificial enhancements, and magical drugs. This proves that the entire crisis was a calculated plot, rather than a random accident. According to Kylie, the motivations behind this attack are likely rooted in a struggle for succession. With the Emperor and Lady Million aging and no heir officially named, rival factions are becoming desperate to secure power. By targeting or manipulating the children of influential figures, these groups hope to gain leverage. Given the Academy's importance in the Northern Empire, controlling its future would provide a massive political advantage. Although Louis finds it hard to grasp that such violence stems from a political dispute, he can't ignore the fact that the monsters seem to prioritize him as their target. Before departing, Kylie promises to keep digging into the conspiracy and reminds Louis that he must keep improving, as the principal is watching him closely. Once alone, Louis looks at the potion and reflects on his need for power. He swallows the medicine in a single gulp, whispering to himself that this challenging journey is exactly what he has always sought, though he remains worried about the safety of his friends. Meanwhile, in a hidden location, the senior who orchestrated the ambush delivers a report to his father regarding the modified beasts. He confirms that while the experiment proved the monsters' increased combat effectiveness, the outcome was not perfect. Many of the creatures failed to self-destruct upon death, allowing the Academy to recover several bodies for study. Despite the risk of being caught by the principal, the mastermind remains unfazed. He argues that since the test subjects were sourced from the Bhutan Empire, any evidence found would be circumstantial and nearly impossible to link back to them. More significantly, the man gazes at a photograph of Louis, questioning the boy's true identity. The senior confesses that he has harbored suspicions about Louis for a considerable time, noting that the boy's formidable presence is impossible to ignore. He suspects that the principal is actively working to keep Louis's background a secret. Regardless of the specifics, both men agree that the boy has become a major threat to their objectives. The villain then calmly incinerates the photo and commands his son to resolve the issue at once. Referring to Louis as a cursed child, destined to bring ruin, the senior cautions that any further interference near their secret weapon could cause their entire organization to fall apart. In response, the villain instructs his son to relay all their findings to the upper levels of the Arcanist Association, believing they will eagerly exploit rumors about such a child. He figures that if the association suspects a cursed child is hiding within the academy, they will initiate their own investigation. From his perspective, the enemy of his enemy is a useful ally. This mastermind is revealed to be Prince Vaughn, the duke in charge of the noble faction and Brian's father. Shortly after, Louis returns to the training fields to focus on his meditation exercises. Despite having his eyes shut, he maintains a sharp awareness of his surroundings. When Kane attempts a surprise attack from the rear, Louis senses the motion immediately and defends himself with ease. He doesn't stop at just blocking. He launches precise counterstrikes against Kane's frantic attempts. During their bout, a sudden surge of energy heads straight for Louis, this time from Faye. Known for her inability to hold back even during friendly practice, she throws herself into the fight with her usual ferocity. Remaining composed, Louis reacts just as her strike nears, conjuring an ice shield that absorbs the impact perfectly. The rest of the group watches the scene intently, certain that they have finally trapped Louis and are about to land a winning hit. They are convinced he must have overlooked something in the chaos. However, Miliana quickly senses that Louis has actually anticipated the entire maneuver. Her intuition proves correct when Louis calmly emerges from the settling dust. Instead of being critical, he offers his friends praise for their progress. He commends Kane on his increased speed and precision, noting that he has truly mastered their hit-and-run strategies. He also speaks highly of Faye, observing how she has successfully boosted the power of her spear techniques by integrating elements from her hand-to-hand fighting style. Above all, Louis commends Miliana for her tactical thinking, specifically mentioning her clever move of concealing Kara's item in the mud. He expresses genuine joy at the rapid progress his friends have made, noting how much their speed and power have increased. He even confesses that if he hadn't relied on his cold sense to detect the subtle shifts in the air, their synchronized assault might have actually caught him off guard. Despite these compliments, Kane remains frustrated, arguing that even with their combined efforts, they haven't truly managed to challenge Louis. He points out that Lewis walked away from the entire exchange without a single mark, which to him proves that they are still far behind. Faye, on the other hand, is captivated by the concept of cold sense. She admits she has never encountered a technique like it, so Lewis explains that it involves a complex circulation of mana and mental focus. Although he is still perfecting the method, he promises to show her how to use it once she grasps the underlying theory. As the group relaxes, Miliana offers Louis a recovery potion, though Faye immediately tries to sneak in another attack, failing just as she had before. Observing this, Miliana remarks that Louis sometimes feels out of place, almost as if he originated from a different world entirely. This comment catches Louis off guard, nearly causing him to choke on his drink. Visibly nervous, he wipes his mouth and asks what led her to that conclusion. Miliana clarifies that her observation stems from how openly he shares his expertise. She notes that in their society, people usually keep their techniques strictly within their own families, yet Louis gives his knowledge away freely. She jokes that he must have picked up such unusual values in a previous life, which leads an awkward Louis to scratch his head and laugh. He suggests that his behavior might simply be a result of his commoner upbringing, which differs from noble traditions. He adds that since everyone in their circle is already helping one another improve, he finds the idea of them growing stronger as a single, united team to be truly inspiring. Finally, Faye interrupts the moment to remind everyone that they need to return, as they have martial arts lessons scheduled for the following day. Before heading out, Faye warns Kane and Louis to behave themselves and stay out of trouble. Kane playfully teases her in return, and the friends soon depart together, their laughter echoing across the grounds. Lewis, however, decides to stay behind at the training area. Checking his bag, he is frustrated to find that his supply of recovery potions is nearly exhausted again, which will require another trip to the exchange counter. Just as he is about to consume another dose, Kylie suddenly intervenes and stops him. She demands to know why he is taking another one so soon, reminding him of her previous warning that constantly consuming these potions could eventually cause permanent brain damage. Her lecture forces Lewis to reflect on his heavy responsibilities. He thinks of the promise he made to his mother to reach the rank of Grandmaster, a goal he must achieve to seize control of the orphanage from the association and ensure the safety of those he loves. With dangerous enemies now focusing their attention on him, his resolve to grow stronger has only intensified. He quietly assures Kylie that he is being cautious, arguing that the potions are a necessary risk because they allow him to double his training capacity. In his view, he simply doesn't have the time to progress at a normal pace. Kylie remains skeptical, asking if he is truly as safe as he claims. As the potion begins to take effect and Lewis recovers his energy, Kylie suddenly becomes alert. She can feel a remarkably powerful aura radiating from him. Lewis, noticing her tense expression, asks if he has done something wrong, especially since his mana seems to be circulating with newfound ease. Kylie is at a loss for words, unable to fully explain the strange sensation she is detecting. Her confusion quickly turns to anger when she notices the pile of empty bottles littering the ground. Visibly irritated, she reveals that she checked the Academy's exchange logs and discovered this was his 8th time restocking this month. She accuses him of drinking at least 2 potions every day, a habit he defends by claiming it is the only way to reach the Grandmaster level quickly, especially since he feels no ill effects. Kylie sharply counters his logic, asserting that becoming a Grandmaster is not that simple. She insists that he needs solid foundational work, rather than relying on substances that push him past his natural limits. She warns him once more that while the damage might be invisible for now, he is risking the complete destruction of his internal health. Without a moment's delay, Kylie firmly seizes his hand and informs him that they are heading for a thorough examination. She insists on testing his aura and checking for any chemical imbalances to see if the potions have already begun damaging his internal systems. Consequently, she takes Louis to have his blood analyzed, a process where his sample is mixed with a specialized testing potion while the principal personally oversees the inspection. Upon reviewing the data, the principal finds the results baffling. Far from showing the expected signs of brain erosion caused by excessive potion use, Lewis's cerebrum appears entirely unaffected. Curiously, the opposite seems true. His cognitive activity is significantly more vibrant and stimulated than average. Kylie, however, refuses to accept this, arguing that Lewis has recently displayed deeply concerning behavior. She describes how he frequently drifts off into a daze and recounts the terrifying, monstrous energy she felt radiating from him just moments before. Furthermore, she notes that he has begun projecting an intense killing intent that even someone of her experience finds disturbing. While the principal acknowledges that her fears are legitimate, he points out that since Louis's magical capacity is growing rather than shrinking, this might be a unique form of enlightenment. He also silently wonders if these strange developments are linked to the mysterious rumors regarding the cursed child. Driven by curiosity, he asks Louis to provide a more thorough account of his recent experiences. During their conversation, the principal reflects on the fundamental nature of magic, considering its divine origins and whether humans and monsters were ever intended to wield such immense power. Ultimately, the principal suggests that because the world is brimming with unsolved mysteries, they should categorize Louis's condition as an unexplained phenomenon for the time being. Despite Kylie's persistent claims that something must be wrong, the principal remains firm and begins to leave. He stops briefly to remind her that the fields of alchemy and potion making are still experimental. Since even experts do not fully grasp how these substances interact with the human body, Louis's unique physiology only makes the matter more complex. Unconvinced, Kylie suggests that Louis might still be concealing other secrets from them. As the conversation unfolds, Louis remains silent, lost in his own reflections. He considers the fact that alchemy in this world appears to rely on fusing raw materials in their natural state, which likely leads to conflicting chemical compositions. He theorizes that by removing unnecessary elements and creating a highly purified version of the potion, one could pinpoint exactly which ingredient triggers negative side effects. The following day, the principal reconvenes with Louis and Kylie. Louis is thrilled to see that the principal has managed to source a vast array of supplies and ingredients on such short notice. Surveying the collection of bottles, a skeptical Kylie asks what Louis intends to do with them, noting that the principal doesn't usually approach potion making in this fashion. Louis simply asks for her patience, promising that his methods will soon become clear. He sets to work immediately, spending hours refining and experimenting with the materials. Eventually, he produces 3 distinct potions and announces his success. The principal is left in total shock upon realizing that Louis has successfully isolated every individual component from the original mixtures. Convinced that the boy possesses a legendary, divine-level talent, the principal excitedly asks if Louis would be interested in studying potion-making seriously under his guidance. He suggests that with such ability, Louis could one day become a world-renowned authority, perhaps even exceeding the fame of Lady Million. Humbled by the offer, Louis tells the principal that it would be an immense honor to learn from him. This response fills the principal with pride, and a bond begins to form between the two through their mutual love for research and discovery. Kylie, however, watches their growing friendship with obvious disapproval. Later that night, Louis returns to his private studies of magical theory. He reflects on how the energy in the potions comes from their natural ingredients. Since plants need water and soil to survive, he begins to see a deeper connection between these elements. To him, earth and water are the fundamental symbols of life. Just as this realization hits him with the force of a lightning bolt, a violent reaction suddenly erupts across his workbench. Kylie can only watch in total disbelief, unable to comprehend how yet another strange phenomenon is occurring around Louis. Unexpectedly, Louis experiences a profound moment of internal enlightenment. Almost instantly, thick vines and roots begin to crawl across the room, spreading with wild energy. The principal stands back in awe as the massive chamber is suddenly overtaken by the sight of growing trees and an emerging forest. He finds it impossible to believe that the latent power within magical potions could manifest such an incredible phenomenon. Louis calmly clarifies his discovery, explaining that true creation isn't about destruction or grand displays. Instead, he describes it as the simple process of providing moisture to the soil to nourish life and allowing new growth to emerge. Based on this insight, he announces that this newfound force should be known as the wood element. Since she has never heard of a wood element before, Kylie is left entirely bewildered. In response to her confusion, Louis simply raises a finger, causing a beautiful flower to bloom right in front of her. As she reaches out to touch it, the flower suddenly emits a cloud of defensive pollen. Kylie is too slow to react, and the substance causes a red rash to flare up on her hand. The situation escalates quickly as the surrounding vines transform into aggressive, monstrous plants that launch a direct assault on her. Angered by the sudden attack, Kylie activates her fire attribute to burn through the vines, though she sustains a few minor injuries during the struggle. As she defends herself, a terrifying thought occurs to her. Lewis isn't just creating life out of thin air. He is also weaponizing those creations with unbelievable speed and precision. Louis calmly points out that generating plants isn't even the primary strength of the wood element. He explains that its greatest utility is actually the power of healing. This revelation causes the principal to have a breakthrough. He realizes that if Lewis is correct, the underlying principles of recovery potions and healing ointments might have been tied to the wood attribute all along. Louis confirms that this is highly likely, explaining that the presence of elemental properties is what truly distinguishes a magical potion from an ordinary plant. Filled with excitement, the principal realizes that composite elements, alchemy, and potion making might all be parts of a single connected system. Because of this monumental discovery, he promises to personally supply Louis with every material he needs for his future research and experiments. When Lewis offers his sincere thanks, the principal just laughs. He tells Lewis not to worry about gratitude, joking that if these discoveries keep coming, he will likely be the one stuck doing all the exhausting follow-up work anyway. Before concluding their meeting, the principal poses one last question to Louis. He remarks that in the human world, physical strength is just a single part of a much larger puzzle. He explains that if a person truly wants the power to alter their own destiny, they must understand that there are complex truths far more important than raw power alone. To test his abilities further, the principal brings Louis into the forest. There, Louis uses his new wood element to make life erupt from the earth at their feet. The principal is once again stunned. Even after seeing it before, the way Louis can grow such valuable flora so quickly and easily feels like a miracle to him. Beyond just creating plants, Louis demonstrates that he can even produce food in a matter of moments. However, Louis points out that this skill drains his mana much faster than he had anticipated. He notes that the more rare or valuable a plant is, the more energy it takes to manifest it, admitting that he is currently pushed to his absolute limit. Despite this, the principal is satisfied, reflecting on the idea that everything has a cost. In his opinion, the price Louis pays is still remarkably low compared to what anyone else would have to give for such results. The principal goes on to praise Lewis for his incredible breakthroughs, specifically his ability to purify potions, eliminate their side effects, and invent entirely new mixtures using wood magic. He stresses that these accomplishments are unique to Louis and that no one else could have reached this level of progress. Following their time in the woods, it is revealed that they have set up a secret laboratory in an underground cave system beneath the Candria Arcanist Academy. In this hidden workshop, they conduct experiments to produce various boosters, including potions for mana restoration, body enhancement, and mental recovery. Picking up one of their recent creations, the principal decides it is time to check for side effects through a practical test. He suggests that the most effective way for Louis to improve quickly is to engage in combat with a powerful rival. Therefore, he proposes they test the potions by sparring with one another. Louis is thrilled by the suggestion and immediately prepares for battle, telling the principal to fight with his full strength. After swallowing the potion, Louis launches into a duel against the principal. As the fight progresses, Kylie watches the scene in total shock. She silently concludes that Louis is a monster in his own right. Even if his intentions aren't malicious, his sheer potential and speed of growth are nothing short of terrifying. After finishing his day, Lewis heads back to his room to shower and decompress, replaying the recent duel in his mind. He notes that the principal had truly fought with full intensity. Had it not been for the innovative potions he had recently crafted, Lewis realizes he likely would have spent the next month stuck in a hospital bed recovering from his injuries. While resting, his mind wanders toward future projects, brainstorming new formulas and ways to sharpen his skills. However, his quiet evening is interrupted when he discovers Kara already in his room, examining an empty potion vial with great interest. The sight makes Louis visibly anxious. When Kara questions him about the bottle's contents, Louis attempts to cover his tracks by claiming the principal provided it for his protection as part of a sanctioned research project. Kara isn't fooled for a second. As he approaches Louis, the young man's nerves skyrocket, fearing his secret is finally out. Kara bluntly asserts that Louis himself is the creator of the substance. Although Louis tries to deny the claim, his lack of skill in lying makes the truth painfully obvious. Giving up the charade, Lewis admits to the feat and asks how Kara knew. Kara explains that by paying close attention to the principal's minor behavioral changes, he was able to piece everything together. Though slightly intimidated by Kara's sharp intuition, Louis begs him to keep the discovery quiet to avoid any unwanted attention. Instead of exposing him, Kara produces a formal contract and shows it to Louis. Upon reviewing the document, Louis is surprised to find the terms are remarkably fair. The plan involves diluting the potions to make them less conspicuous before the trading company handles the distribution. This strategy ensures Louis remains anonymous while still turning a profit, a win-win situation for both parties. Recognizing that this partnership offers him both the resources he needs and a layer of protection, Louis agrees to the deal on two specific conditions. The potions must be weakened to prevent suspicion, and a portion of the support must go to the orphanage where he was raised. Kara agrees without hesitation, updating the contract on the spot. With their signatures on the paper, the new partners finalize the deal. Louis informs Kara that he will start a new batch of potions the following morning, and feeling the weight of the day, decides to turn in early. Kara then departs, heading back to his own quarters. Shortly after the two part ways, a pair of pigeon-like assassins infiltrates the dormitory, attempting to ambush Kara from the shadows. Kara, however, is not caught off guard and successfully fends off the attack. One of the intruders is left baffled, wondering how they were detected despite their perfect stealth. The other quickly offers an apology for the sudden intrusion, clarifying that their only purpose was to deliver a critical message before they vanished once more. In this moment, the truth is revealed. Kara is actually a girl who has been masking her gender to study at the academy. She presents the newly signed contract to her two apprentices, who are visibly confused. They struggle to understand why she would strike such a massive deal for someone like Louis. One apprentice notes that if the project succeeds, their company could become a dominant force in the eastern regions. While the other is equally stunned by the arrangement, he finds it hard to believe that a boy Louis's age could be capable of such sophisticated planning. Kara remains silent, though she privately recognizes that Louis's potential is truly exceptional. Concerned about the future, the apprentices ask what they should do if Louis eventually turns against them or backs a different claimant to the throne. Kara explains that this is exactly why she has a specific mission for them. She intends to take control of the orphanage, believing that Louis is a good man at heart who deserves to be shielded from harm. After receiving their instructions, the two assistants transform back into pigeons and take flight. Left alone, Kara gazes up at the moon and reflects on the fact that midterms are just around the corner. She concludes that they must speed up their operations, hoping that Louis will eventually feel comfortable enough to reveal his true self to the heir to the throne. The story shifts to the Candria Arcanist Academy Exam Center, where students are preparing for the mid-year assessment. This crucial evaluation, held just before the prayer break, consists of two distinct sections, a technique test and a live combat phase. The air is thick with competition as a massive crowd of students gathers, prompting the combat instructor to observe with pride, noting that he is eager to see their progress from the semester. Shortly after, the focus turns to the ranking board where student scores are posted. Here, a notorious challenge known as the Nightmare Technical Exam is introduced. This trial is famously difficult because it forces students to navigate a gauntlet of traps and monsters using only physical martial arts. The use of any arcane magic is strictly prohibited. Remarkably, since the academy was founded, no student has ever achieved a perfect score. The initial results for the group are underwhelming. Neil led the pack with 325 points, followed by Kane at 320 and Faye at 300. Kara and Miliana trailed with 289 and 250 points, respectively. Because none of them managed to conquer the challenge, the fighting instructor expresses his disappointment. He warns the students that their performance fell below his expectations and promises to push them much harder in the coming semester. While this happens, another instructor arrives to check on the freshmen. The first teacher admits that while their foundations are solid, he is actually focused on one particular student. When the second instructor asks who he means, the teacher points toward Louis Kirill, mentioning that even the principal has taken a special interest in him. The second instructor suggests that earning 500 points would be an amazing feat for a mere apprentice, but the first teacher disagrees. Confident in Louis's superior skills, he predicts a score of over 600 points and challenges his colleague to a bet, with the loser buying a bottle of 10-year-old aged spirits. The second teacher scoffs but accepts the wager, determined not to lose this time. In the background, other students begin to gossip and whisper as they watch the newcomer. Many express doubt, mocking the idea that a commoner could succeed where so many noble families have already failed. Unbothered by the quiet ridicule, Lewis Carroll steps calmly into the trial area. Almost immediately, a hidden mechanism triggers a massive volley of arrows. As they fly toward him, Lewis's eyes begin to glow, and time seems to decelerate. With perfect focus, he begins to read the trajectory of every single arrow, anticipating their movements with effortless precision. With sharp and controlled movements, Louis weaves through the deadly barrage of arrows. Explosions thunder behind him as he dodges every projectile, successfully clearing the first trap without a scratch. He refuses to slow down and immediately moves toward the second challenge, a massive pit where purple, tentacle-like structures surge upward to snare him. Before the limbs can even brush against him, Lewis executes a perfectly timed leap, clearing the entire danger zone in one smooth motion and landing securely on the far side. As he continues through the trial, he encounters a slime-like creature. Their confrontation is short-lived. The monster and its companions suddenly pull back, retreating into the darkness as if they were trying to lure him toward a greater threat. Moments later, Louis finds himself facing a massive cannon mechanism. Destructive projectiles are launched at him from one side, but he has already deciphered the firing pattern. Suddenly, attacks begin coming from the opposite direction as well, trapping him in a crossfire. Remaining calm, Louis realizes he is being targeted from both sides. Just as the projectiles are about to hit him, he launches himself high into the air. The attacks collide beneath him, resulting in a massive explosion. While suspended in the air, his cold and calculating mind processes the overwhelming amount of data. He acknowledges the effort required for these calculations, but remains confident that he can still see the essence of the trial. Through his sharp observation, he predicts every outcome before descending back to the ground through the thick smoke. Upon landing, he quietly notes that jumping was his only viable solution. Lewis is well aware that the danger is far from over, and that another strike could happen at any second. Rather than rushing ahead recklessly, he waits and studies his surroundings to identify a safe path by analyzing the trap patterns. By the time the next wave of attacks is triggered, he is already prepared. Having mastered the rhythm of the mechanisms, he moves with absolute precision, slipping through every strike by following the sequence he decoded. In a remarkable turn of events, his strategic positioning causes the cannon fire intended for him to collide along the same line. This results in the traps destroying themselves in a massive blast behind him as he advances. With a controlled and steady pace, Louis navigated the chaos, leaving the spectators in a state of total shock. One of the instructors, unable to mask his wonder, questioned if there was even a known way to defeat the boy. He noted that Lewis had not only avoided every single strike, but was also managing to neutralize both the traps and the monsters simultaneously, showcasing legendary observational skills. The combat teacher, however, remained composed, telling his colleague that it was too early to be surprised because the student was likely on his way to breaking the record without even breaking a sweat. As Lewis moved further into the trial, a new threat emerged. He attempted to intercept an incoming strike but missed, as a swarm of strange purple bats began circling him with mocking speed. Their unpredictable flight patterns were so difficult to follow that a rare look of frustration flickered across Louis' face. As he stood his ground against the creatures, the second instructor remarked that since the Bat Lake Echo was considered the fastest monster on the continent, no amount of raw talent would allow Louis to succeed through physical ability alone. Lewis, however, did not waver. He suddenly stomped his foot against the ground with immense force, triggering a powerful shockwave. This move signaled the start of a pre-planned technique. The atmosphere shifted as he launched a synchronized assault against every bat in the air. Although the creatures tried to scatter in different directions to escape, Louis moved with superior speed, closing the gap instantly. He began striking them down with relentless accuracy. Watching the scene unfold, the teachers were left speechless. Lewis continued to eliminate the monsters without stopping, and his score surged at an incredible pace, climbing from 500 to 750 and beyond. Visibly shaken, the instructor praised the boy's split-second judgment and his ability to spot even the smallest opening. He mused with deep interest that if Louis were to ever join the military, he would be a formidable asset. Without ever losing his momentum, Lewis steadily overcame every remaining stage of the challenge. When the dust finally settled, his final score flashed brightly on the screen, 9999. The students' reaction to this perfect result was immediate and filled with bitterness. Many were visibly angry, refusing to believe what they had just seen and whispering resentfully about how a mere commoner had managed to take the top spot once again. Stunned by the final result, another instructor asked if Lewis had truly broken the record with a flawless score. The combat teacher, however, remained completely composed, as if he had anticipated this outcome from the start. He reminded his colleague with a small grin to have the alcohol ready before the upcoming holidays. Visibly irritated, the other teacher complained that this was precisely why he despised gambling. The atmosphere shifted as the students gathered around. Kane Oranka walked up to Louis and asked how he had managed to bypass every trap without relying on magic, wondering if he was using a secret technique. Milena also approached, warmly offering her congratulations on his record-breaking performance. Amidst the crowd, Neil caught Lewis's eye for a split second. His expression was impossible to read, and he chose to walk past in silence. After a brief and casual conversation with his friends, the focus returned to the instructor. The teacher announced that the technical portion of the exam was officially over and that the live combat phase was about to begin. He explained that participants would compete in order and encouraged them to give it their all, even if things became a bit intense. Following this announcement, an arrogant noble student stepped forward. He noted that he was eager to see his opponent, viewing the match as a chance to teach the younger students a lesson. While fiddling with a unique ring on his finger, he checked his card and plotted to strike Louis Carril whenever he showed a moment of weakness. Nearby, Louis examined his own card. Kane Rinka noticed they were in separate brackets and remarked that their potential duel would have to wait until the finals. Faye Durahan chimed in with determination, warning Kane that he wouldn't even reach the finals if he couldn't defeat her first. While everyone analyzed their matchups, Neil looked at his card and smiled with satisfaction, clearly pleased with his assigned opponent. In the background, several nobles continued to mock the commoners, obviously hatching their own schemes. Finally, the instructor ordered everyone to head to their designated stations immediately. The participants began to disperse, preparing themselves as the first matchups were revealed.